Good morning and good afternoon if you're joining in from an area which is ahead of India in terms of the time zone. So a very warm welcome on behalf of Autocar Professional. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this edition of the EV Forum. I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well, with best wishes for your safety and well-being. It's my privilege to start the proceedings of this mega 3-day virtual conference titled EV Forum. And among the key global megatrends of connected, autonomous, shared mobility and electrification, or CASE as the acronym goes, the last one, which is electrification, is set to make the biggest impact in terms of change in the automobile and the industry as we know them. Electrification is no longer an option for any industry player planning for a sustainable future. The global electric vehicle market is projected to reach a size of around a little over $800 billion by 2027. That's according to German data firm Statista. The projected growth figure translates to a CAGR of over 20% between 2019 and 2027. That's a significant growth rate potential. The opportunity size is huge, without a doubt. And so will be the size of the required efforts to plan and execute the transition well. And that is what we are here for, to understand where things stand in the electric EV industry, how things are moving, and how can it be better, bigger, towards making India a key global EV industry in the global scenario as well. So, about little over 8 years ago is when Autocar Professional hosted its first seminar on the theme of electric mobility. That time, in fact, it was little soon after the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan was unveiled, and a lot of discussions, interest about electric mobility, and the discussions were whether in electric mobility will have a mass scale in India, and how will it go. Now we are at a stage where the weather part is, of course, no longer a question. It is how, and rather how soon it will be. So that is where we stand today. And over these 3 days, starting today, we will get a lot of insights, information from key industry leaders across segments, as well as the very crucial component industry, and more equally, if not more importantly, government officials, because as we all know, when it comes to electric mobility, the government has to play a key role, at least in the initial stage. And that has been the case in many countries overseas, where electric mobility EV industry has already reached a certain scale, particularly in Europe. So with that, it is time now for me to introduce our keynote speaker. And I'm very proud, so is Team Autocar Professional, to welcome Mr. Amitabh Kant, to introduce Mr. Amitabh Kant, who is the keynote speaker of this day of the EV Forum. And a quick introduction, well, he doesn't need it, but nonetheless, it's my pleasure to share that Mr. Amitabh Kant, who is presently the CEO of National Institution for Transforming India, NITI Aayog. He is a member of the Indian Administrative Service of the Kerala cadre 1980 batch. He is the author of Branding India, an incredible story, and has edited The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. Mr. Kant has been a key driver of the Make in India, Startup India, Incredible India, and the famous God's Own Country initiatives that positioned India and Kerala state as leading manufacturing and tourism destinations. These campaigns have won several international awards and embraced a host of activities: infrastructure development, product enhancement, private-public partnership, and positioning and branding based on extensive market research. That's very, I mean, a lot of accolades and a lot of achievements by Mr. Kant, but everyone would agree more that he's one of the most outspoken bureaucrats in India, and a strong proponent of clean mobility, particularly when it comes to electric mobility. Mr. Kant was supposed to join us live in this session, but a new development required him to travel out of Delhi. Therefore, he is not able to join us live. However, he has kindly shared a recorded address for this EV forum, and I would like to request my colleague to kindly play the address by Mr. Amitabh Kant.
I'm delighted to deliver the keynote address at this autocar event. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the world is at the cusp of a mobility revolution, which is going to be shared, connected, and zero emissions. Two-wheelers and three-wheelers constitute 80% of the total vehicle sales. These vehicle categories are low-hanging fruits in our electrification journey. We should target for 100% electrification of new two-wheelers, three-wheelers sales in the near future. With the size and scale that India offers to these vehicle categories, along with simultaneous reduction in battery prices, they make a perfect fit for electrification. At the same time, it is important that cities of tomorrow need to embrace the concept of transit-oriented development where public transportation is the backbone. This will be a key determinant of ease of living to provide affordable, inclusive, and safe mobility, along with zero emissions-based public transportation. Government has recently approved the production-linked incentive scheme for automobile sector worth 25,938 crores for 5 years. This scheme focuses specifically on electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and their components, which will drive investments of about 42,500 crore and create 7.6 lakh additional jobs. It builds a complete bouquet of incentives for electric vehicle ecosystem in the country, along with close to about 1.3 billion subsidy under $1.3 billion subsidy under FAME 2. Incentive for battery manufacturing with PLI of about $2.5 billion and a GST of 5% for electric vehicles versus 28% for petrol and diesel vehicles, zero registration fees, road tax, permit waiver, income tax benefit, among others. Moreover, remodeling of FAME 2 has borne tremendous results for the EV ecosystem. These have led monthly massive spike in sales for electric two-wheelers under FAME 2, which have increased 4 times to about 9,000 vehicles a month. Electric three-wheelers are also on a high growth trajectory, with ESL issuing tender for supply of about 100,000 electric three-wheelers. This is 1/6 of the total annual sales of three-wheelers in India and will bring in a huge disruption in Indian markets. India is also taking a lead in the manufacturing of electric vehicles, with several firms like Ola, Ather setting up manufacturing facilities to manufacture for India and the world. The dominance and leadership that India has in the traditional combustion engine two-wheelers must be replicated in electric vehicles. Other firms like Okinawa, Kinetic Green, Revolt Motors are also pursuing domestic manufacturing and going for maximum localization content. Private equity venture capital firms have pumped in around close to about 672 million in the EV sector in the last couple of years. The rapid technological evolution is driving the transportation revolution in the world. Battery technology is evolving rapidly, where prices of battery have fallen more than 90% in last 10 years to $137 per kilowatt hour. I expect that these will go below $100 per kilowatt hour by 2023. The financial viability of electric mobility has made it more acceptable to masses. The total cost of ownership parity has been achieved in all vehicle segments with a 5-year time span. The time span reduces much more in case of commercial vehicles like freight, delivery vehicles, which have emerged as the first mover. The upfront cost of electric vehicles is also falling rapidly due to technological innovations across the value chain. Alternative ownership models like battery swapping have actually made the cost of electric vehicles at par with internal combustion engines. The prices of solar in India have reached a record level of rupees 1.99 per kilowatt hour. This is unprecedented in the world. We can reap its benefit to produce green hydrogen at the cheapest prices in the world, and that should be used to propel our heavy duty vehicles like trucks and long haul buses and make them zero emissions. The puzzle of reducing emissions from heavy duty vehicles gets solved by using green hydrogen along with its potential to reduce emissions in industrial sector. India is the world's best IT industry, and we are aware that electric mobility revolution would be driven by power electronics, artificial intelligence, and automation. The electric vehicles would have higher value addition of electronics and IT components than traditional automobile components. The world's best IT sector of India would be an incubator for innovation and R&D of transportation of tomorrow. And this includes not only electric vehicles, but also shared and connected transportation. The world is fast embracing the concept of electrification in transportation, and India cannot remain insulated from it. At the same time, the world is reeling under climate emergency as elaborated by recently released IPCC report. We have to take action now to limit the global rise in temperature to 1.5 degree. Transportation sector, which constitutes nearly 1/5 of the total emissions, must move towards zero emissions. And here, the mobility industry will have to play a very critical and a very major role. Niti Aayog is here to partner in the shift from combustion to electric, the shift towards a shared and connected and a zero emission world. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure speaking to all of you.
And we would like to place on record our sincere thanks and gratitude to Mr. Kant for sharing his address, sharing his views, and thoughts about where India could move and how Niti Aayog is all ready to partner the industry to facilitate the growth. Indeed, the transportation industry has to play a very key role, and especially in the backdrop of the kind of climate change and the climate action that needs to be that needs to take place. And as you mentioned, about 20% of the emissions coming from the transportation sector, there's a good scope that the mobility sector can contribute in arresting the decline of the environment. And with that, it is my pleasure to bring in my colleague and managing editor of Autocar India, Sergis Barreto. So he will be the host for the first panel discussion of the EV forum, which will start shortly. Good morning and welcome, Sergis.
Thank you, Samantha. Thanks for having me on as well.
And you heard Mr. Kant talking about, the scope, the kind of efforts from the government in terms of trying to facilitate the growth of the electric mobility industry, trying to encourage people to adopt electric mobility at a larger scale. Yes, it's at a very nascent stage. Volumes are nowhere near the critical level. A lot of challenges, but
absolutely.
Do you think the time has come? I mean, especially, by the way, congratulations on Autocar India's 22nd anniversary. And as you can see, there's one issue right behind me, and it says EVs galore. So
yes,
has the time come for EVs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, thank you. On it's been 22 years for Autocar, and it is an EV kind of special, if you could call it that. It's no surprise, also obviously, given that industry, government, everyone is looking at EVs. And what's also, I would say, quite refreshing is consumers too. So it's no longer only kind of driven by industry or government, but there's a lot of consumer interest also in EVs. And in the B2C kind of publication that we are, at least, it is showing, we are seeing a lot of that interest.
You're getting the sense that the consumer awareness is on the rise, is it?
Absolutely on the rise for sure. People are definitely interested. There's a lot of questions. And I think, which is why, panels like this and what we're going to be having today, a discussion, make a whole lot of sense, and like you said, government backing is definitely required, but only in the initial phase. I think after you sort of get the ball rolling, it's just going to gather its own inertia and keep rolling forward, because it's something that that answers a lot of questions from a consumer point of view. People like quieter engines, they like less vibration, and these are things which EVs are sort of inherently designed to deliver. Unlike an IC engine where you then work on bringing down the noise levels, bringing down the vibrations, making gear shifts smooth. And EV just has this all intrinsically. So I think after the push from the government, after the push from industry, we should see inertia taking hold, and I would think a good smooth ride ahead.
Right. And since you spend more time with cars, tell me the kind of range that the current crop of EVs, not that there are too many of them, whatever is available. Do you think that the kind of range bracket that they offer, is it good enough? Are consumers comfortable with that kind of range, or do you think they still need more, slightly more, to feel more comfortable with the EVs, which will also facilitate their adoption better?
Yeah, absolutely. See, I think choice is always good, and if you look at EVs today, there isn't that wide a choice at all. You have just a few handful of players, and even those models are all strung along a price point. So if you were, technically speaking, if let's say you have 5 EVs, but actually for a shopper in a particular price bracket, it would boil down to less than that, So for example, you have a Tata Nexon, and you also have an Audi e-tron, and they are at completely different ends of the price bracket. So obviously not catering to the same shopper. So definitely, I think more choice is needed, and of course it will happen automatically. We know every manufacturer has been talking a lot about their EV plans, about the EV future, and it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen.
Indeed. And I think as things stand now, I mean, the two-wheeler industry is taking lead, and a strong lead at that, in terms of driving the Indian EV industry, as Mr. Kant also pointed out.
Yes, I think that's in fact very heartening to see. And two-wheelers, by their sort of nature of use, I would say they are they're prime candidates to adapt to EV technology. Cars, yes, they're used in the city, but they also do long interstate trips, weekend destinations. Bikes, a lot fewer, that do these kind of trips. I would say the percentage of bikes that are used in the city is far, far higher, and therefore range is not so critical an issue in a two-wheeler as against, let's say, a four-wheeler. So by that sort of logic, an EV two-wheeler is a lot more easy to manage.
The use case of EV two-wheelers make them more conducive
absolutely.
for adoption as in the electric avatar. And I think, and that's also kind of encouraging the supply chain also to kind of get more into localization of these EV technologies.
True.
And it's a catch-22 situation. I mean, many of them want to get into the EV technology business, EV component business, but the much needed scale is not there. And the scale is not there because things are not localized. So it's a little tricky situation that the industry is in now.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's going to change. And like you said, also just to bring in another point on the two-wheeler side, you must also remember that the lower running cost of an EV also then makes it a very attractive proposition for somebody using a two-wheeler who's using it as his daily mode of transport, let's say to the office and back, regularly commuting, let's say 30-40 kilometers a day. And so that becomes very, very attractive now. The price in terms of running cost is just so much more attractive. In fact, if you look at it honestly, Samantha, it would be cheaper than buying water that you need to go cycling. So it can be that attractive. So yeah, I think
indeed, that's why now there's a sub segment in the electric two-wheeler business that's for B2B B2B application, like delivery and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Delivery, in fact, for delivery people, there's also another key benefit. In fact, a lot of courier companies have been noticing this, and I've personally heard from them also, is that of fuel management and pilferage. They don't have that bother anymore. So yes. That automatically is taken care of. Whereas in the past, you had to look at the kilometers done by the bike, match the fuel consumed and the bills to make sure there was no pilferage of fuel. They don't have that worry anymore. So a lot of the delivery companies are saying that this has been another sort of benefit to them.
That's a rather an unintended benefit by the electrification.
in a way, absolutely. And I hope two-wheeler manufacturers do use that in their sales as well, sales pitch, because it's quite an enticing sort of proposition to have.
I'm sure you must have thrown a good idea to many of the people who are attending here. I can see Mr. Nagesh Basavanelli already logged in, and I'm sure I'm going to be surprised if the pitch by Ampere Vehicles also mentions that was one of the added advantages of going electric.
Right.
So I think so just we can see panelists already logging in gradually, and so I would like to hand over the reins to you, and looking forward to a very interesting session. We have got a very nice representation of the industry.
Yes, true. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you so much. And yes, today, we will be discussing, the various challenges to mass e-mobility. And we've got an excellent panel with us today. So I wouldn't want to take any more time away from what I'm sure is going to be a very informative discussion. So allow me to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Suman Mishra, CEO, Mahindra Electric Mobility Limited. We have Anand Kulkarni, Product Line Director, EV and Alpha Architecture at Tata Motors. We also have Chetan Maini, VC and co-founder at Sun Mobility, and Mr. Nagesh Basavanhalli, CEO and MD Greaves Cotton. So good afternoon to you all. And to kick off, I thought I'd like to invite each one of you to perhaps just speak to us in an opening address, maybe about 2 minutes or so. And then, of course, we'll get deeper into the discussions. So let's begin with Suman Mishra. Good morning, Ms. Mishra. Over to you.
Good morning, Sajis, and good morning to everyone attending this EV Mega Forum by Autocar. It's great to be here today. As he introduced, I'm Suman. I'm the CEO of Mahindra Electric and CEO designate of the Mahindra Last Mile Mobility Division. So it's a handful, I know. What I thought I'll cover in my opening address today is to give a little bit of the context from our perspective, maybe tease out a few of the insights we are getting from customers, and where I see or where we see Mahindra Group playing in the electrification space. I think as everyone knows, and it has been mentioned ample times, that electrification is irreversible in India. India is on that path, and the fuel prices essentially dictate the speed of the electrification today. So the fact the fuel prices have reached 100 rupees has really triggered an intense spike in the electrification as we see it in the smaller segments. So there are a lot of estimates, okay? You speak with any consulting firm, market research agency, they have multiple estimates, but broadly what it looks like is the three-wheelers, which are part of the last mile mobility segment, they are already at the tipping point in terms of TCO economics. Specifically, if you take, and if you go by some estimates, there's maybe 65% electrification in the three-wheeler. If you calculate e-rickshaws, which are really difficult to calculate because they are, sort of this unregistered, difficult to measure category. But let's talk about electric autos, which is the lithium-ion counterpart. We expect that this should reach 25% in the next 3-4 years, and then 60 to 70% by 2030, assuming that some people will not convert, that we will not get to 100% conversion, but there will be some who will still prefer CNG and diesel, etc., for different purposes. So we're really looking at a huge conversion, more than the majority converting in the next 7-8 years to electric autos. And what drives it is, along with the price parity, which has now been reached, the TCO economics, as people get used to using the electric autos, there's already familiarity in this category because of electric rickshaws. So as they get used to electric autos and start using them in the commercial category, this is really going to accelerate. I'll talk about four-wheelers, which is the other category of interest in Mahindra.
Sorry to interrupt, but before you could get there, perhaps I thought maybe let's introduce the entire panel, and of course we will circle back. Dying to hear about four-wheelers also. Okay,
sure. Let me then just finish up my comment.
Sure. Oh, okay, sure.
So what I was saying is Mahindra, as you know, is one of the pioneers in electric mobility, and we really are committed to expand the electric portfolio, both small vehicles and four-wheelers. And this continues to remain a very key priority area for us. And I look forward to a conversation.
Right. No, I'm sure consumers too are looking forward to a lot more from Mahindra and to hear a lot more from you as well. So thank you so much. And to bring in our next panelist, we have Anand Kulkarni, the product line director for the EV architecture at Tata Motors. Mr. Kulkarni, over to you.
Hi, good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, though I don't think, yes, you are, yes.
Hello,
Mr. Kulkarni, we can hear you. Hello. Okay, we'll just wait a second or two, perhaps, to give Mr. Kulkarni a chance to just figure out the little tech issues that we have. Okay, I think I will just circle back to Mr. Kulkarni and like to bring in our next panelist, who is Mr. Nagesh Basavanhali, Group CEO and MD, Greaves Cotton.
Good morning, Sergius. Good morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me well.
Yes, absolutely clear, and we can see you clear as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for having us. From an introduction perspective, I think it is a no-brainer. You don't need to go too far in a November day in Delhi to figure out why we all need to focus on sustainability, right?
True.
Added to that is also the unit economics, right? With the battery prices falling, and Mr. Kant was talking about that earlier in the speech, right? And also in terms of the supply chains ramping up here in India. I think these are some exciting times. When you look at where do we play, Greaves Cotton has always been in the last mile mobility space. We have moved people and we moved cargo, right? In our what we've done over generations, over 160 years, is do that. Now what we are trying to do is move the future transition to the clean, sustainable solutions, and by which we play in the two-wheeler, right? Which is the affordable mobility space, which is the heart of the two-wheeler segment, right? That's kind of where we play. We play in the e-rickshaw segment, which is less talked about, but significant in terms of lives and livelihood that it impacts people, right? You don't need to go too far from Delhi or go to Meerut or go to Ghaziabad and or even in the east, right? You see that. It's impacting lives and livelihoods as we speak, right? Right in the middle of it. Then it's the e-auto, right? Which is the L5. So when you look at it, 80% of the last mile mobility, which is two-wheelers and three-wheelers, that's the area that I think we participate. So in terms of introductory remarks, I think this is an exciting phase. Electric technology is not new. It's been around. But can we adapt it to India? Can we make it sustainable? Can we work in a collaborative manner with the entire ecosystem? Can we bringing in the other parameters, which is financing, which will be a key part? Can we bring in the consumer experience, the sales and the service experience, which is the other part? Can we eliminate the range anxiety and then the awareness issue? Awareness issue has improved significantly over the last 1 quarter, I would say. Can we work on that? I think those are parameters that I would say what the industry is looking at. Can we get our supply chains ramped up? That's been a challenge right now, right? I think, but all in all, it's an exciting time, especially in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler, the place we play. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. Glad to hear that. And we're definitely going to circle back, of course, to everyone. Now move on. Hopefully we have sorted out technical issues. Mr. Kulkarni, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you. There was a glitch. I hope you're able to hear and see me. Good morning, everyone.
We can hear you. I don't think we can see you, though.
Oh, is it? Because I've got my video clicked on, so I don't know.
Unfortunately, no, Mr. Kulkarni, we just have a...
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to step out one more time and allow for someone else to pick.
Sure, I will do just that. I'll do just that. Sure, sure. So yes, that brings in then Mr. Chetan Maini, VC and co-founder at Sun Mobility. Mr. Maini, over to you for a few opening remarks, please. Mr. Maini?
Yeah, good morning,
yes,
everyone.
We have you.
Good to see everyone here. I think Nagesh already spoke a lot around the industry point of it and covered a lot of things. But I think we're, at a very, very top level, what we see is a lot of things coming together that haven't happened in the past, right? At policy, we've got FAME, PLI, states, what's happened with Shunya, what's happening with CESL. A huge advancement in the technology, a lot of companies coming in the product side. You see more products. You're seeing for the first time consumers now switching to say they want to go electric. You're seeing in certain segments cost parity happening, and you're seeing a lot of investments coming through on this area. And more importantly, you're seeing the outcome of these happen, right? In the last 3 to 4 months, goods electric three-wheelers have transitioned from 1% to 10% of sales, and two-wheelers definitely with the FAME subsidy has grown to over 300% from where it was pre the earlier subsidy regime. So there's definitely a very clear area here on this front. And I think in this area, there are going to be a lot of form factors, a lot of business models that are going to coexist as we look at this larger transition to come through. Now, focus is trying to see that what is the shared mobility market need, and we find the challenges around high cost, range anxiety, and long refilling time are very critical. And battery swapping enables us to do that. It enables the price points to become cost neutral. It addresses range anxiety and long refilling time. It addresses concerns that people have related to what happens to the battery after 3 years, 4 years, when they're buying an asset. It also enables people to upgrade technologies on an area. Today, you buy a vehicle, 3 years down the line, the batteries deteriorate because people are really correlated to their current cell phones. And in this case, it's up. So I think that what's exciting to me is that with all of this happening is you're going to also see a variety of these models coming out and coexisting. And that's, I think, going to further drive the electrification process, because it's not just going to be the product side, but there's going to be large work on the ecosystem and the infrastructure, which is as important to grow the business side of it. So we're very bullish about this. And I think it's just, in the 20 years that I've been doing this, this seems to be the moment right now, and look forward to good discussions this morning.
Yes, absolutely. I think, as you said, in 20 years, you've been doing this. I guess now's the time. Better late than never. But thank you so much for those remarks, Mr. Maini. And over to Mr. Kulkarni.
Yeah. So can you hear me? I'm sure you can see me as well.
Yes,
now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Sergius. Good morning, everyone. Chetan, Man, Nagesh. This is Anand Kulkarni here. So I couldn't agree with what my co-panelists have said more than what has already been said. This is probably the best time to be in electrification. All the work, and Chetan, I must compliment you for having this vision 20 years back. I think absolutely necessary to have done that then. But what's also happened is look at what's happened in the last couple of years. A is there's been a lot of awareness about pollution, environment related issues. And B is along with us at Tata Motors, a couple of other people also have brought out products that have dispelled or at least sought to dispel the myths that existed around electrification. And these myths were something that we all know about. We still deal with them in some measure or not. And these are about range anxieties. These are about durability, reliability, life, and of course, the charging infrastructure. And but once aspirational and better products were available to the customers, you see how quickly the market has moved. I mean, you all track what's happening. We today, 25% of or a quarter of what inquiries we get for the entire Nexon brand happen to be for electrics. And they're equal in number as compared to what we have on diesels. So that is stupendous. Now, going forward, I mean, I heard bits and pieces of what Suman was saying as I was logging in, but I think she's absolutely correct that penetrations will improve. The anxieties of people will get subsided or they will get quelled. Not only as people start to experience products, because there are a lot of fears, and as people see more products happening, they sort of realize that their fears in quite a few cases would be unfounded. The infrastructure, while we all wish that it could have been faster, but even today the infrastructure that has grown is good enough for people to undertake intercity travel relatively easily. You don't really need to plan around operating, living, and working with an electric vehicle. It's becoming easier by the day. While we say this, challenges will exist. Supply chain challenges are indeed one of our bigger issues. And while it's exacerbated by the current semiconductor crisis, we see that semiconductor crisis will probably wane off in next couple of quarters. But even then, supply chain issues could remain for some time, at least on certain key other components like cells, for example. The second issue is also about what Nagesh perhaps spoke about or alluded to, is how do we create this entire workforce reskilling, upgrading to handle electric vehicles? That's an area that we probably need to work on as well. And of course, as I said earlier, we need to have more choices to people, more awareness sessions, so that the uptake on electrification can be that much faster. Sure. So that's what it is, and I look forward to having some more detailed discussions as we go on.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you and having you all on board. And we've only just begun the opening remarks, but I can see loads of questions pouring in. We've got a few discussion points, so I'm going to kick off straight away with a question, perhaps to Ms. Mishra. Right now there's a lot of talk of electrification of everything, right? From passenger cars to long distance trucks to two-wheelers, three-wheelers. Do you think there is one sector perhaps better suited to electrification, and should we target or sort of zone in on that, or is it better to just try and electrify everything? What are your thoughts?
So as we have been alluding to, this is going to follow TCO economics and supply availability. And as and when consumers get more and more aware, they are going to make the switch. So like I was talking in my opening remarks about the three-wheeler segment or the last mile mobility segment, this is a pure total cost of ownership driven segment. And I can tell you from all my conversations with the customers, they simply do the math. I have to drive X kilometers a day. Does this work out cheaper for me over a year, 2 years, over the warranty period of the vehicle? And if the answer is yes, they're going to make the switch. If they see an influencer next to them driving it already, that switch is going to be faster. if they have not seen anyone around it, they will maybe consider a few options or maybe go for CNG, etc. So for three-wheelers, as I was saying, we are already at the TCO tipping point, particularly with the FAME subsidies. Because of the FAME subsidies, we are already at the tipping point. And so we think it's going to be 70% in the next 10 years or whatever. The second one, the four-wheelers, is going to be a little bit more challenging. It's a few years away. You know, we have been in this, Chetan knows, and we have been in this forever, right? So maybe 15 years ago was too soon. Now is probably little bit early, but we are there. So what we are thinking, it should be in the 20% conversion range in 2025. I'll just tell you a couple of interesting points. This company does a lot of customer interviews to understand what is the propensity of EV consideration. India is one of the highest in terms of EV consideration by customers, 90%. Roland Berger does the study, 90% of the people say they would consider an EV purchase in the next 2 years. Of course, as soon as the ecosystem and other enabling factors are in place, which means, charging, which also means price points, availability of sort of mass market products. All these are just, transitory. This is going to change faster than we anticipate. And we are just going to see a significant shift away from the conventional ICE. The numbers vary. Maybe I have a number which says 20% by 2026, led by the SUV segment. Anand will probably have a higher number, but these numbers vary, but it's happening. It's happening, and and we have to put the fast charging infrastructure in place. We have to give more products, and this change will be faster than we anticipate. Two-wheelers, I will not comment. I'll let Nagesh or others comment on this, but for these two categories, I think change is imminent. We are going to get surprised.
No, that's a fair point, and I think what you said is quite telling, that it's a TCO-driven kind of initiative. Maybe yes, we know there is a huge environmental benefit also, but I think yes, TCO also will play a sort of big impact in that. And I think, I just want to toss it over to Mr. Basavanhalli. You had earlier said that, there are other challenges also in this mass mobility in EV in terms of getting financing and things like that. So do you see challenges there? Okay, TCO may point towards, yes, EVs, but are there other challenges you think in adoption?
Yeah, thanks, Urjus. I agree. TCO, I think, is very, very competitive, and I think it's getting better thanks to all the favorable government policies, right? Now, getting to your question, in terms of, since you asked me about the challenges, financing has been an issue. Make no mistake about it, India is a country where people need affordable financing, right? So 18 months ago, I couldn't convince the big banks to come work with me, right?
Okay.
That situation is changing, and changing rapidly. Hence, we also started our own NBFC, and we are seeing now a lot of partners lining up. So the situation has rapidly changed, I would say, in the last 6 to 9 months, with more banks. And in fairness, it was new technology. It was, okay, how do what does it mean from a resale value? What does it mean for especially on the lower end, if it's unlicensed or unregistered, how do I account for it, right? So there were some things that the industry had to work out. But I'm very glad to report now most of the major banks are with us, including the top ones to the mid to the cooperative banks, right? And this to me is a big enabler. Whether it is two-wheeler or three-wheeler, financing is a huge enabler. Keep in mind, we are nowhere near the traditional IC engine financing percentages. When you look at financing as a percent of the sales, right? We are nowhere near there, but we are getting better every month. So it's definitely interesting, and that's why companies like us have put in our own NBFCs in place. But yes, I think this is a key enabler if mass scalability has to come.
Right. Oh, that's very interesting to hear, and obviously also very heartening to hear that changes are happening. Finance is now a lot more easily available, and on that same note, Mr. Kulkarni, we just wanted your opinion. So yeah, we've just been discussing the certain challenges, finance being one of them. Do you think in terms of resale value, battery life, because I already see quite a few questions in our chat already asking about what happens to the battery life, resale, etc. Do you think these are challenges that we will face in time to come? I know it's still early, but do you think these are challenges that we will face?
So in fact, Sergej, I would say that the resale value is a problem today because, and a part of the problem is because there is no past reference of how the residual values need to be calculated. In the ICE world, there's been a lot of data, there's been a lot of information. So you have all these algorithms running and you have an automated sort of scheme of things to say what should be the resale value of a vehicle, which is done as many kilometers or as many number of years, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, right now, that's not available in the EV space. But look at it this way, that let's assume that the acquisition cost of an electric vehicle is 20, 25, 30% upwards of what a likewise ICE engine would have. And let's say that in the first year or so, the depreciation is huge, yeah, because there's lack of data. Look at it this way, that already Suman said, and it is true, that there is a cost of ownership which is working very closely. We are almost hitting parity. I may have slightly different data points on four-wheelers, which will tend to say that the four-wheeler parity is also not too far away. Of course, it depends on the range that you speak about. But the point being that the moment a 20-25% depreciation happens in the first initial period, the cars suddenly start to become imminently valuable to the second user, because the cost per kilometer is already 1/6, 1/7 of ICE vehicle. It is probably 1/3, maybe you could argue half of what it is in terms of a CNG kind of a vehicle, but undoubtedly it is cheaper. And this initial period where the first owner may have had to wait for a longer period in order to recover his investment through the operational economics, for the second user or for the third user, it becomes that much more favorable. Therefore, in my opinion, and this is personal opinion, that this initial fluctuation that you find in the residual value, this will soon give away as more vehicles are available in the market, and people discover the value of the car, and you will find that it actually builds back up again. Of course, there are fears about battery, there are fears about what happens if I have to replace the entire thing, and so on and so forth. But please understand that today almost everybody is talking about an 8-year, 160,000 kilometer kind of a battery warranty, and which could go up, which is not going to go down. It's going to be at least at this position. And therefore, you have a significant value unlock that happens to a second user. And this is going to actually make the residual values go higher. My view is it's just a matter of time.
Right. No, that's actually very interesting that you said, the first depreciation hit. After that, EVs are now to the second owner. It's at par with any ICE engine car, and I think that's a very interesting point that you make. I think fully agree with you, and probably bet that way as well. That the used market would seem now more enticing. And I think towards the end, the tail end also, of the used EV. Mr. Maini, do you think over there things like swappable batteries and bits like that could actually help the industry?
Yeah, they do. And, again, it's different for different segments. If you're a passenger segment, car segment with low usage, right, then that's a very different to a shared mobility segment, right? So I'm going to focus a bit more on the shared mobility segment. So when you think of resale value, the reason the resale value is a challenge is people don't know if the battery is costing you 40% the cost of the vehicle, what's the value of the battery, right? So in a battery as a service business, you don't care about that anymore, right? In fact, 3 years down the line, you probably can get a battery that's even better as part of a service than what you bought initially. So in one case, your vehicle performance would could lower down. In the other case, actually, you would have better, right? So therefore, you address the issue of battery that's in people's mind. You address the issue of resale value on this area, because the rest of the electrics, the chassis, suspension, everything is well-known depreciation, right? And in general, motors are much better. How often do you service your fan in your house compared to your generator, right? It's just something that goes on for 20 years. So therefore, as a result of that, as people get to recognize it, right, you will start to see a much better value on this area. The other point is that in cars and stuff, it's easier to do advanced thermal management, right? You can have temperature controlling everything. In smaller form factor vehicles that constitute 85% of India, which is 2 and 3 wheelers, right? It's very difficult to have air-conditioned batteries and thermal management, right? So therefore, in hot summers at 45 degrees, subjecting batteries to that temperature and continuously using often gets batteries above 50 degrees, which means the battery life could decrease by half of this area, right? And that would be very detrimental from a consumer point of view, right? So again, it is very different as you think of the different segments and the solutions on this area, right? And so while on a car, it may be easy to get an 8-year warranty, because 160,000 kilometers with even 300 kilometers is not even 600 battery cycles, right? So very easy to achieve 600 battery cycles at all areas. But if you start to say, okay, I want to do a 80 kilometer on a scooter, and I want to do the same area or on a rickshaw, that is a lot more cycles, right? So therefore, you need to see that the context is very different on each area. The technology is different, and the solutions have to be different to meet those consumer requirements.
Right. No, I think that's a very interesting point that you made. It's because it all ultimately, as you correctly said, it all boils down to the cycles. The charge discharge cycles. We know that from using batteries, I guess, everywhere, right from our phones and things like that. So the other challenge to this, the battery, and in terms of swappable batteries, I just wanted to ask Mr. Basavanhalli, what do you think is there a challenge for manufacturers like you to maybe get together on a common platform? I mean, I think there was one question that also said that, phones took so long to standardize sort of the micro USB, and even now we have variation, so what do you think in terms of standardization? Is that going to be a challenge for manufacturers?
Yeah, so I think two-part, I'll answer it in 2 parts. So one is, yes, it did take some time. There is a lot of discussion in the industry circles and in the SIAM and SMEV circles, right? And I think at some point in time, we will probably get there. I have a feeling it's a little early, given the fact that there is a lot of innovation yet to come. And we need to innovate for India. We need to make sure that, right? So I think we need to find the right balance. At least that's my view. Just going back, if I can, sir, just to the swapping, and then I think again, understanding the Indian conditions. In 2018, we did a survey, and as part of the survey, we figured out that our customers in high-rise buildings were going to have a problem with charging. So on the 2-wheeler, we had a removable battery where the customer can pull out his battery, take it to his high-rise building, right? You don't need to drag your vehicle through a lift. You need to just pull it out, battery, charge it on your 15 amp overnight, and it can work. So I think, how do we innovate to find consumer answers or consumer unmet needs, right? Through local innovation and I think that's kind of where the industry is right now, right? And so we are all for, we are agnostic in that sense. We are both for fast charging and swapping, and we have also made our batteries detachable. So I think we will see how this thing evolves in general.
Correct. I think that's a very interesting point. And just going back to what you said earlier, probably standardization right now may not also be the best thing, because it might stifle innovation. And I think we're yet to see a lot of innovation in this industry. So I think, yeah, that's a very interesting point to note. While standardization is something that a lot of people have been talking about, in fact, even right now I can see on our chat. But yeah, I guess there is a time for that as well. And looking at some of the questions, I think what everyone also wants to know, and I can see a lot of people asking this, is that, CNG some time ago was hailed as sort of the substitute, the cleaner fuel. the cheaper fuel to petrol and diesel. But that kind of never happened for India. So, maybe if Ms. Mishra, you could come in, maybe also here. Do you think this EV will also go down the same route, or will this prevail? Will this break through, or would it just be relegated to another CNG? In fact, that's the exact wording I think someone has asked also.
Yes, this will be me preaching to the choir here. So yeah, no, it cannot go down the same route as CNG. Although CNG, there was a lot of availability issue, but electric power is actually available everywhere. Now, if you talk about the mass market segments like your two-wheelers and your three-wheelers, they charge it at home. So the power is actually readily available. Also, the fuel dependency that India faces today. We have solar power, which can theoretically get rid of our coal dependence as well. So basically, we are talking something that is going to leapfrog the country both into sustainability, lower pollution, but also help us with our deficits. So the supporting factors are fundamentally much stronger for electric vehicle. The only issue I would say is sort of the dependence on the cells from China today, which again with the new ACC, PLI ACC and the PLI for automotive, advanced automotive component, this should solve itself. So if you think about it, fundamentally, it's not like an incremental step. This is going to be a leap step. And really, because it supports a significant amount of sustainability, because it supports a lot of fundamental import-export balances for India, I don't think this is something that will slow down. And I feel very confident about it as I speak more and more to customers. They are the ones who know this market. Like Nagesh was mentioning, the heart of India, the core of India, the ones who drive this vehicle from a day-to-day purpose, they have already switched in their mindset. They do the math. They are far better at doing this calculations than we are, because they do it in their custom usage, and they are already switching. See, electric rickshaws, even with inferior technology, shouldn't be at this level of penetration if this was a real issue, right? We already had CNG. So all these sort of indicators point to me. You can see our deficit, our export dependent or import dependency on fuel. You can see our schemes. You can see the pollution imperatives, the focus of ESG on all companies. And I feel all of this are in a very positive reinforcing loop, which will push us forward, which will not sort of go halfway. But who knows the future? I, as a believer, as a Mahindra Electric CEO, and as a big believer in sustainability and sustainable mobility, really having seen when you can ride something and not affect the environment, why would you choose otherwise? Someday this thinking process is going to come into all our minds as we feel, we see climate change, we see pollution, and we are going to make this choice with or without TCO, So it's my view that this is not reversible, but, welcome any other thoughts or comments.
No, I think that's interesting that you said also, that CNG, yes, there was the challenge of obviously the availability. And I think that kind of answers the question to a lot of those who've asked it here and have been voicing that. Electricity is obviously available already. So it's not something, a new energy source that needs to be now channelized. But there are a few challenges, of course. Having said that, there are a few challenges also in certain areas in India in terms of electricity availability. And there's also the challenge and the question actually of clean energy, that electricity, how clean is that? And I just throw this out to the entire panel, if anyone would like to jump in here. Do you see that as changing? I mean, we are still a very coal-heavy, a coal-dependent nation in terms of power production. Do you think that we will be able to move away and rapidly enough from this dependency on coal?
But let me just give a perspective on some numbers on that area, right? If you 2022, India is talking of 175 gigawatts coming in, right, on total renewable energy, And if every vehicle is electric next year, that would need less than 25% of that amount.
Okay.
Every vehicle sold next year, right? Which is highly unlikely, right? So just to give you perspective on this area, if we fast forward to 2030, India's talking around 575 gigawatts, right? Probably if everything was electric by then, including the current fleet operational, we'd probably need less than 350, right? So which means, again, highly unlikely with 100% electrification, right? You maybe have 20, 30, 40, 50%, depending on segments. And there's a past fleet also that exists, right? So I think there's a real opportunity for us to bring in renewable. I think we have a policy in the country on renewable, we have a policy on storage, and we have a policy on mobility. I hope in the near future, these three policies get stitched up on this area. And that would enable us to really seamlessly think of the entire energy and clean energy ecosystem with mobility on this area. And then if you think of it that, the recent deals at clean energy have been done under 3 rupees per kilowatt hour, whatever price of gasoline you think, we've already crossed that point, right? So it makes sense for someone to come and put up a solar farm, right? Feed you and power an electric vehicle, and makes business sense for everyone in the ecosystem. I think to me, that's a transition point where clean energy becomes very big, right? Now, we're going to have challenges around the policy side of it. How do you get wheeling in there? How do you get the distribution network to come into? How do you look at local grids? I agree with you, there are challenges. So if the opening up of the grid, the opening up of enabling of selling and buying energy are going to be things where policy changes have to happen over time. And so I do think that with the larger picture of green energy coming in, and with other policies around this, we could really have an ecosystem where consumers could even opt, like in many countries, to say, I choose to buy renewable energy, right? Like you have a private players, and you're already seeing privatization happening in that segment in a few cities, right? So you'll see more and more of this, and consumers by choice are making that option of that they would like to have that.
Right. Right. No, I think, in fact, I wanted to just stick with you on that point. Like you said, in terms of generation of clean energy, I was just reading a report, I think yesterday, that said India has seen also great gains in rooftop generation. So not just, obviously the public and the solar farms, but rooftop generation. Do you think that's an area that we should aggressively look down, rooftop generation of clean energy, solar energy?
Yeah, it's a great distributed solution. If you start to think, can every rooftop in a city have it, and can they take 20% of your energy out? If vehicles are now coming in and spending 8 hours in a building or charging, or even from swapping point of view, can they use that? I do believe that 20-30% of the energy could come in quite easily. And again, if the policy makes it easier to install it, right, allows you to buy and sell energy cheaper at right levels, you see a mass adoption of that. The moment it makes business sense for people, it would happen. I already think it does, but it's not been done at the scale level that we could probably, incorporate this at.
Right. No, I think, yeah, like you said, it's a good idea to have it because it's distributed across. And I think I would agree with you there too. As people see that it is making an impact, it would happen, sooner. And I think we also have Mr. Basavanhalli, who had to leave us. Are you with us still, or? Yeah, so my apologies, and I would like to excuse Mr. Basavanhalli. He had to be called away on a slight urgent matter, but nonetheless, we will, of course, carry on. And there was a question I wanted to put to let's say our two panelists who represent the OEMs here. We see a lot of platform sharing today in the ICE engine world. There's a lot of even model sharing today, as we know, sharing of technology between rival manufacturers. With electrification, do you think that it, there being so much common, do you think that it would electrification would drive manufacturers closer? Would these sort of tie-ups and sharing of technology be even more now in the electric world?
Maybe Suman, would you like to go first, or? Okay.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So I guess our view is, platform sharing is not necessarily new within the industry. I mean, even in the
Exactly.
even in the ICE worlds, significant leverages of common assets, common parts, common components, and the advantages are very well documented. I don't think we need to discuss that. The question, therefore, is which areas do you want to therefore share? And I'm going to lay out a couple of possibilities, and then let's pick it up, and also we'll have Suman comment on that. But you look at if I'm speaking from a passenger car perspective. Pardon me, that's my background. So, if you look at passenger cars for individual use, then you have one kind of a use case. You have shared mobility, and you have another kind of use case. In shared mobility, differentiation is often not at a personalized level. It is only meant for getting you from point A to point B in a relative amount of comfort with a certain price point, and therefore you have shared mobility is built around a completely different set of requirements. So doing this on a shared mobility using a common platform of the kind that some skateboards or some common platforms are made, which allow you to access significant volumes and therefore drive down the costs, which can help shared mobility become further attractive, is one way to look at it. From a personal perspective, if you want to drive differentiation, then the very spirit of trying to commonize something beats that purpose. And therefore, there is a limited use in that. Now, look at what happens to electronics or the traction units of electric vehicles. Obviously, we can always say that it's far easier to integrate electric powertrains into different vehicles, just because you don't have to spend as much time in emission treatment, emission optimization, drivability, performance optimization, etc., etc. So it becomes a little easier. However, that said, different vehicles might want to differentiate in terms of their voltage levels, their performance levels, their overall efficiency aspects, and the way that they are trying to cater to the market. Therefore, while certain parts become a commodity and can be transferred across platforms, across applications, it would be difficult for somebody to say that we can do everything and just do a cross badging. Typically, look at something like Volkswagen, which would create something for the base platform and then apply it over all their other models. That is possible, but cross-sharing of platforms, cross-sharing of key parts right now between OEMs, unless it is from a very, very specific use case, we find that it's a little difficult to happen for the reasons that I said.
Right. No, thank you for that insight. So it's actually, as you said, from what I can therefore sum up, is that it is possible, but there are still challenges. It doesn't necessarily mean it's now easier. There are newer and different challenges.
Correct. And the challenges are not technical. They never are technical.
True. And Ms. Mishra, do you echo that view, or do you think
maybe I can add a few more points. I agree that OEM sharing is always fraught with a lot of legalese and economic arguments around it. And in this particular case, if you commonalize the part that makes you different, then what are you left with? It's a big question, right? The differentiation is a critical question. But having said that, there are two places where we will have significant leverage of the ecosystem. One is, of course, our supply ecosystems. I don't want to name them, but there are a lot of tier one suppliers who are offering different sets of components, whether it is just motors or whether there's a full kit or whether it is some integrated parts of the vehicle ecosystem. There are also these global OEMs who are offering the skateboards. So it is, if you're just bringing the skateboard and you can tweak the performance using software, which is actually possible in the world of electric vehicles, then you can get your differentiated, motor output, and your ratios can be different. But the place where definitely there is going to be commonalization is, of course, software. That already, a lot of players are participating in terms of the Google collaboration that is there. Volvo, Nissan, Renault, everyone has participated with Google. Amazon is partnering with GM, and a lot of, along with the Alexa integration, then there's the Google's Android, automotive, iOS. So on the customer experience side, when you talk about the software side, there are going to be some collaborations. I think the development cost is extremely expensive. Here also, though, always the challenge remains that this is where you differentiate. So how much are you going to take the base and then tweak the software layer, the top layer, or are you going to go full-fledged with it? So, but I do think that, here in the world of EVs, because software can allow you to make a differentiation, it may be actually in the long term easier to collaborate and then show the differentiation with the tweaking. A little bit unlike sort of the ICE landscape, but it's going to start with the supply ecosystem. It's going to start with the solution providers, and eventually maybe move from OEM to OEM partnerships. But you may be already aware a lot of OEMs are also offering their platforms for sharing, just to build up the scale, because the scale has not reached critical mass. So all these permutation combination possible will start not with OEM sharing skateboards immediately, but suppliers giving us skateboards or parts, and then, or maybe the software side of things.
Right. No,
So,
sorry.
Just to add to that, I think,
yes.
Where we look at it is we believe that there's a large opportunity around the battery swapping, which is actually shared. You're sharing a piece of it. But very much to Suman's and Anand's point of view, it's important to, being an OEM in the past for so many years, is how do you keep that differentiation but still create value on it, right? And so what we've tried to do is say, okay, you can use 1, 2, or 3 batteries, so you can have flexibility of range, right? We use a standard product on this area, but there is a software piece in between that is customized for exactly what the OEM wants. So the OEM wants a certain performance related to acceleration or control limits, or how the state of charge would be, or what would be the regen limits. All of that can be customized, right, with the same experience on this area. So then there is like something is standardized to enable low cost and using common infrastructure, but it's customized from the OEM's point of view to give them that feel that is differentiated on this area, right? In addition to that, because you standardize things and have standard docs and solutions and communication parameters, you can reduce the time to market by 30-40%, and you can reduce the development cost by 30-40%. So net at the end, can such a thing give an OEM a competitive advantage and at the same time keep their differentiation in place? And so I think that's an area that we've been working very strongly on, right? And the way we look at it is today, you don't have a petrol station for only one car. Any vehicle goes in there. So we think that the energy is a bit different, but still make sure that what's required for the OEM is given there, right? This allows, and one of the many mechanisms in addition to skateboard chassis and other pieces, that we believe that it integrates well, creating a win-win situation on this area, right?
Right. No, I think that's interesting. And Mr. Maini, just to stay with you on that, it just got me thinking. Do you think suppliers, the side that you represent today, would see an elevation in terms of the hierarchy within? I think in the older traditional model, a lot of the engineering and R&D was done by a manufacturer. It was given out to suppliers to then supply the required components. But if you look at the electronics industry, a lot of the engineering is actually done outside, and it's more now sometimes just a matter of even badging. Do you think the auto industry could actually get there, where manufacturers could basically brand someday in the future labeled products which are essentially slightly different, maybe top hats or something like that?
Yeah, so I think 2 points to it. I think the first part is certain segments will see a set of distributed manufacturing, right?
Okay.
Probably smaller, easy form factors of vehicle would probably have that, which is around 2-wheelers, start off with, and maybe 3-wheelers, right? So you could see a cell phone kind of industry where someone buys a battery, a powertrain, everything, puts it together, adds a layer of software into it, right? You're seeing that in the recently with the, I think it's the MHLI thing in China with Foxconn and everything, of 1,800 people who've come on board to a consortia that is looking at doing the same thing on the car segment, right? So you're seeing a set of things already coming in where this could definitely make sense on an area. that doesn't mean that the current OEMs don't have a role. I think they're moving up. They're moving closer to the customer. They're working closer to the experience of this area. And one of the things is they need to get to market in half the time and in half the cost, right? And what this does is probably helps you get there, right? So I think it's a must-have to be there as part of it, right? Because it's hard for you, one, to innovate in every aspect. There are so many new battery technologies coming on, so many new powertrain technologies, so many new areas, right? To vertically integrate yourself on everything is difficult, right? So if you want to be innovative, move fast, do you have an ecosystem that allows you to integrate quicker by still giving consumer at the end point on this area? So I do think there's a value. It's harder as you go to certain segments. It's easier in certain areas, starting with a two-wheeler segment.
Yeah, I think that's essentially what would also happen. Like you said, easier form factors, like a two-wheeler would be, I think, something that would we would see that, and we're probably seeing that already. If I'm not mistaken, in the two-wheeler space, where there's a lot of commonality between not just batteries, but a little, I would say, larger systems as well. And I think, just to throw over the point you mentioned in terms of getting closer to the customers, to the panelists that we have representing the manufacturers. Mr. Maini just said, getting closer to customers is going to be a bigger role. Do you see the demands from a consumer now different? Are there challenges you think servicing customers in an EV world as against what you all did in an ICE world? Or will this just largely be, business as usual in terms of customer servicing and client interface? Mr. Kulkarni or Ms. Mishra, if you'd like to take that.
I can get started. I do want to add one point to what Chetan mentioned, is this shift of profit pools is not likely to go in one direction. I think everyone has a role to play in the ecosystem. And for example, if OEMs just make top hats, then what value do they add in the value chain, and what will happen to their margins is going to be a big question. So there will be a balance somewhere in between, and the industry is going to evolve that way. These are my views, because, there is software, which is also going to take a big chunk of your profit pool. So, as an OEM, you cannot just be dependent on the vehicle side of it. You will have to move into the technology side of it too. At least that has been our understanding and notion throughout. The question was, what are the customers asking? See, I'll just tell you a little bit about the three-wheelers, where we have a lot of products, and also all that history of selling the E2Os for the last, 15 years. Customers, once they use the product and they get comfortable with it, they are really maturing fast. But the servicing part of it, because there are fewer parts. So there are 2 points I'll make about the service. One is, of course, that you need certain equipment to service these vehicles, which are maybe a little bit more expensive equipment. You also need to do a lot of technical training and upgrade the people who are doing the service, because now they're talking about cells, balancing the cells and figuring out the charge cycles and so on and so forth, and guiding the customer around that. But once we go through one cycle, I think this becomes easy. It is not. It's not something that is so difficult. I mean, we all figured out how to use phones, and we all figured out how to use Zoom. So we are all going to figure out, and we all know how to do WhatsApp video calls. So we are going to figure it out, how to get this vehicle operate so that it doesn't hamper the quality of the vehicle. So we should trust ourselves to just go up the technology curve. The other issue, which is the revenue from service is going to fall. And that is something that all the OEMs have to figure out how they will address, because fewer moving parts, fewer changes. You still need to probably take it to a dealer. You can't do it in the roadside mechanics setup. So that whole thing is going to see a shakedown. To whose benefit and detriment, I think the jury is out. But that side, we are going to see some changes in the near term. But I think Indian customer who expects the high value car in the with the top specs of the global OEMs, they are always ready to move up the curve. I think there is not going to be a problem from the customer side. There may be a problem from us figuring out economics, our service network, and training side.
And Sargis, if I may add
Yes,
to what
please.
Suman has said, looking at the early customers who've sort of been buying these cars, these are the early adopters, and obviously there's been a lot of interest amongst these people. They're all very well read, and they always would come to buy an electric car already with a lot of prior information, and if I may also say, some views about what an electric car is. And therefore you need to have the people attending to these customers already at that level of understanding and being able to explain these aspects to them. So there's been that challenge of how do we upgrade, upskill our people on the ground to make sure that they are able to address all these questions, because what happens is they come with information and they are seeking to ratify or verify whatever they have learned, and they are looking for more details. And therefore this has been one part where we've had challenges. We've had to work in a very focused manner on these things. The second thing is, people usually get used to how the charging cycles are and what needs to be done, etc., etc. But if there are any software related glitches, if there are any error states, if there are bugs, often the comparison is made to something that has a more matured product life cycle, phones, for example, or any other devices that we tend to use. And therefore, people want to understand what went wrong, why did it go wrong? And there's a lot of interest about this. I think having the interest, having the awareness is a healthy sign. Being able to handle it, I think, is a challenge. And we are forever growing in our understanding as we help customers find the right use cases for themselves.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I think, it's, I think as both of you pointed out that, yes, there will be some challenges. And I think what Ms. Mishra also spoke about is the revenue in terms of servicing. OEMs would need to sort of figure that one out as well, because that is, of course, for a dealer, for the dealer community, also a very big source of income. There would be changes there, but yeah, I think, that would also eventually settle down, and as we say, the new normal would eventually happen in the EV world too. And moving on, I was just looking at a lot of our guests who've joined us in today. There is sort of a lot of questions, and I'm going to try and, of course, throw them out to the panel, as many as I can. But one thing that has been sort of common is indigenization of this technology. I think earlier on, some of you also spoke about this, that we are still reliant on certain outside technology. Now, this has its pros and cons, of course, but do you think there's a need to rush forward with indigenization of this technology, or should we embrace certain global, learnings and standards? And Mr. Maini, having had sort of a diverse background, right from like you said, having had this idea some years ago, do you think that perhaps back then we should have pushed forward with indigenization of this technology? Should we do so now, or is it okay to still look at a global model, which would be the way to go?
So you talked of two separate points: indigenization and standardization. So if I look at countries that have made their local markets very strong, right, and create a global competitive advantage, they've generally been the strongest in that segment, right? And they set the standards. So if I think of two-wheelers, for example, right, we're definitely the largest player in the world, right? And we are a large exporter to everywhere, right? There's no reason why we shouldn't be setting global standards, right? And right, because if that's there, then the Indian markets will have the competitive advantage. The world follows us, right? And we're exporting to other markets. So it's very important in certain areas we actually take a leadership role, right? Where we anyway from a market size are the largest on this front. So that would be my thought around certain standardization. In certain areas, standardization where we are followers, bringing in global standards may enable us to go faster because we anyway, so if it's a car charging stand or something, maybe we don't have to reinvent it on this area. And there may be a faster way to look at it there. So I think we have to think of not just one thing, shoe fits all. We should think of our country in the next 10 years and see what's the right thing for the industry and this area. In terms of indigenization, it's in our inherent interest that we push this agenda much faster, right? And the faster we're able to look at it, we're able to probably have a longer-term competitive advantage. We did that very well, again, in small cars and in two-wheelers in the country. And that long-term gave us that competitive advantage. So we should learn from those experiences and say that this is something we should push, right? And it needs to come into tier one. The PLI scheme needs to get the tier ones in to invest to, and the OEMs, right? And the ecosystem providers, right? So I think at the same time, there is a short-term gap. You can't overnight turn on a switch and say cells will come out miraculously here, right? There is a 24 to 36 month gap on certain areas like cells. So certain things that are going to take some lead time, there's flexibility. Certain things that we can do very much right now, there's a higher level of push on indigenization. And I like the policy, if that's framed correctly, where companies are incentivized to go to make domestic production versus penalized if you're importing. I think the incentivization process, if the PLI scheme can come out correctly, can really help trigger a large investment in the tier ones.
Right. No, so I think, yeah, as you said, to sum up, it's a selective approach that you see going forward as far as both standardization and indigenization of the technology. And just to stay with this point, in terms of indigenous solutions, we've seen from a lot of consumers who have adopted early EV adopters, there are very specific things that they require. In fact, one thing very interestingly, and forgive me because I don't know if this is common across all EVs, but a lot of EV owners have been reporting that if the power trips while you're charging your electric vehicle, through the night, the generator comes back on, the EV doesn't start charging by itself. So technically you could go to bed having plugged in your vehicle, but wake up the next morning with a battery that's not fully charged because the current tripped. So technically when the current trips, you've got to apparently re-plug in and restart the charging cycle. Now, do you think that's, first of all, is that common across EVs? And is that an example of, indigenous solutions that we need to have? And this is open to the three of you.
So let me take that. But before I respond to that or share my thoughts, I just want to also add to what Chetan said. And I think he's right saying that it's not a case of one shoe fits all. And therefore, from an indigenization perspective, you've got to look at it in a sort of a hybridized or a hybrid model. And pardon the pun here, but you need to look at the hybrid model for the simple reason that you can't say that we will, with the intent of localization, with the intent of indigenization, suddenly become extremely competitive. On one side, as products, you need to be competing with the best in the world. And on the other side, you need to gain the competence, and therefore you need to invest time and effort into making sure that the solutions that we do here are equally good. So a hybrid approach where we start off with certain things and sort of invest locally to build on the competence, which gives the local industry, local people an opportunity to scale up, is what I think will work the best so far as we are concerned. Then coming to the question that you mentioned, Sergius, about the charging, I think there's a little bit of a myth around this again, because let's look at two types of charging. We're talking about the DC charging, fast charging, and we're talking about the AC. DC charging, yes, once you have a trip off for whatever reason, you have to re-establish connection between the charger and the vehicle. You have to authorize, the authentication has to happen, and only then it will start. But let's say you are in a residential situation and there's a power trip off, the charging gets discontinued. If charging returns, or if power returns, let me say, the car will start recharging without having to go and manually intervene. Yeah. Now, there is a risk that if the power does not return, then you could technically wake up to a car that's not fully charged. But in the event that the car, that the power does return somewhere intermittently, the car will start recharging. And today with, for example, if somebody were to be very concerned because the next day morning they have an important engagement, etc., through connectivity, you can have an alarm go back to the person saying that the car has discontinued charging and you might want to take action on it. Yeah. So these kind of solutions can exist. And I think it's a matter of time before people get used to this. There will be certain risks, of course. You can't do much if there is a power failure. But in the event that power returns, you should not have a problem of having to go back and restart and re-energize or re-plug the car, and that kind of thing doesn't happen.
Right. So I think that's a good note to a lot of EV owners out there that, as you said, this is more of an issue on a DC charger where you have to reauthorize and not really on a AC. And that kind of takes care of the concern in itself, because the DC one would be most likely the public charger and your AC would be more likely the home system. So I think the problem sort of takes care of itself in that system to a large extent. But no, thank you for that insight too. And on your pun of hybrid, I saw a lot of chat going up on our chat box saying, what about hybrids? So I think you've opened another discussion point. And again, to the three of you, I guess everyone would like to hear what are your thoughts on hybrids. Do we consider these as EVs? Are they EVs, or should we just ignore them? Or should we look at them as a path to EVs? So again, to the three of you.
I would say there is the global truth, and then there is a company-specific stand. So, globally, there are many OEMs who believe that hybrid is the intermediary as you move from ICE to BEVs. But more and more, we are probably going to leapfrog it and move to BEVs sooner than later, because you can just see the supply is coming. It's all the OEMs are investing billions of dollars into creating a BEV portfolio. And as and when the supply comes, this will change the demand imperative. There are only few OEMs who are sort of saying they will do the hybrid in the middle before moving on to BEV. So if you just take the global picture, and I don't want to talk particularly about my company or our policies, and maybe Anand has a view to share Tata's policies, but just saying globally, if you look at it, the amount of investment dollars that is going into creating full BEV portfolios, the supply is going to come. And once the supply comes, this is going to switch to BEV. So, and also, I mean, in India, the policies are not necessarily very conducive for hybrid, and they're quite expensive. And so the government has also given us a very clear ask. And now with the PLI scheme and the PLI ACC scheme and the FAME scheme, I mean, this is very clear from the government standpoint that let's leapfrog into BEV. Let's not, pause. We should lead the world in electrification is what they believe in. So I think it's okay to assume that once the supply comes in, it will move over to BEVs. Some OEMs who want to do hybrid, they will probably also have an adequate runway period, because there's going to be a period of time when all types of powertrains are going to be in existence. It's not going to switch overnight. There will be diesel, there will be petrol, there will be CNG, there will be hybrid, and there will be BEV. So there is going to be adequate period of time when all of these powertrains exist. But my understanding from just the macro behavior of India and the policy setup is that we will probably leapfrog directly into BEV.
See, I have an additional view also. There was a time when battery prices were very expensive, and therefore you did not have as much range capacity being packaged into a certain format of the vehicle. Hybrids, in my opinion, made a lot of sense because A, they would save on some pollution. B, they would also give you that incremental value in fuel efficiency, and therefore they return themselves that kind of investment. But what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years is battery prices have dropped down so rapidly Therefore, it's anybody's question, why wouldn't you want to switch straight away onto a much more cleaner solution that gives you the ability to package more than the natural complement of what you need as range on the car, at least for 95% of the cases, if not more. Yeah, and therefore, today, if you see, it's almost come to a point where if you decide to package a reasonably sized and reasonably adequate hybrid power system, it would probably start to compete with an electric powertrain vehicle. And with further prices dropping down for electric vehicles, this is going to tilt in favor of electrics. And therefore, I mean, it's just there in front of us. When and how do we want to accept it is the only question.
Right. No, I in fact, so I think from what I'm gathering, as both of you all have said, is that given where we are in India today, it's probably best that we bypass and we would probably just naturally bypass the hybrid era and get onto EVs. But Mr. Maini, to bring you in, what is your opinion on this? As also a supplier of the technology, do you think that there is merit in hybrid still? Does it have any advantage at all?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think it's something that made sense. People did it 20 years ago. At this point, we need a solution from an energy and an environment point of view. And from both perspectives, electrics make a lot more sense, right? In a hybrid, you bring the complexities of it. You continue to keep the complexities of an engine and add the additional complexities of electric and integrate them together. So you just made all aspects more challenging on this area. And are they not giving us a zero emissions side, right? And the challenge round was around range to say, okay, how do we get range? I think that is today being addressed either with larger battery capacities and fast charging or in other form factors with swapping. So you're addressing the range anxiety and giving finally the consumer a better experience and a cleaner solution. So, I think for us, it's like we switched directly from in telephony to digital. We didn't go through the analog route, right? I think for us, I in that way view it the same way, that if you're to make an investment today, what do you make it in? You make it in a solution of the future and not something of the past. And as mentioned by the other panelists, that's been a clear direction by the government too. And so I think it's the industry will align on thing that makes sense and where the government also is pushing the country towards.
Right. No, thank you for that input. So I think, yes, from what we can sum up, it's quite safe to assume that hybrids were a good idea, but it's something that we didn't do and therefore shouldn't look backward now. And I think we'll probably just go way past that and straight into the EV world. And I think all of you did mention in your address and various points that government backing is also something that's we've been seeing, and the recently announced PLI scheme. In fact, a lot of people who have joined us here today are also asking for your thoughts on that scheme. While it's been largely welcomed, there's a lot of good points to it. There's also been some amount of maybe concern in that maybe people feel that it's not going to be really helpful to smaller startups who have really actually driven, to be honest, have been actually driven the EV sort of revolution, to be very fair, whereas it's been the bigger companies that have come in later. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that element of concern fair? And should we be looking at these smaller EV startups also, or is it fair to say that, you bet behind the bigger players is the safer way to go? I know we don't have any of the smaller players here, so it makes it a little bit,
I was in Chennai on, is it Tuesday? Monday. I was in Chennai on Monday with Sri Arun Goyalji. And, this is a fit for purpose scheme meant for the larger players. He actually explicitly also stated that for startups, there are different schemes and different policies, and they should pursue that route. But this is really to push the large manufacturers to put their investment dollars in the advanced automotive technologies as well as the component manufacturers, right? So if you just look at what this policy is, it's really game changing. You know, on the one hand, they have the FAME, and we have the state subsidies, which give the customer the incentives to buy the product. FAME, which also helps us reach the TCO parity. On the other hand, we are going to have this incentive, assuming, of course, we put in the big bucks to invest in localization. And the thinking was very, very clear. The thinking is indigenization of products that have, let's say, over 70% imports today. It could be any product, not necessarily advanced automotive, like he made a mention of sunroofs. So localization of that in India. And of course, then the cells is going through ACC plus our regular automotive PLI and all the other components, like the battery, the power electronics, the BMS, everything else. So this is it's a carrot, I think, for the bigger OEMs to invest in this schemes and leverage it within the next 5 years. And I think the intent is really to pull forward this change. Right. You know, it's really, the intent is very clear. We will pull forward if we push the investment dollars today and in the next 2-3 years, then we are definitely going to accelerate the speed of the transition. I think that's the thinking. It's a very clear thinking. Surely it is meant for the larger players who can put in the big dollars and who can drive the sales up and meet all those criteria. I'm sure the government is always looking at startups and ways to enable them as well. So there are going to be different policies for this. It's a very breakthrough scheme in my view. It's really breakthrough because there are some things in that which are so nuanced, which is the PLI for ACC plus the PLI for advanced automotive, both are applicable. So this is like a first time in when 2 PLIs can be applied on the same product. So there's much deep thinking in there, and they're also willing to listen and change as we give in the recommendations on the components, etc. So it's a big one. I think it's for us to take the chance and really double down on this technology development.
Right. So yeah, I think for what you said is essentially it is obviously geared towards the larger players, but not unfairly so, because there's a lot for also the startups and these smaller players in the EV space too, and both sides can take benefit of this. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting point that you made. We do have a few more minutes. I know I'm stretching your time as well, but before we head into the technical session, perhaps if we can take up maybe just a few more questions from our guests who've joined us today. There've been, I think, from what I can see, there's a lot of people who also want to know, will the EV shift change things for commercial vehicles, large commercial vehicles, in terms of buses, trucks, vehicles that have to do longer distances. In fact, I can see at least about 8 or 9 different queries on the same point. What are your thoughts there? Because we've been focused obviously a lot on 2-wheelers and on 4-wheelers, but and commercial vehicles, but again the last mile commercial vehicles. What about the the long distance, the heavier commercial vehicles? Is electrification too early for them, or is it something that you think would happen there as well?
So from a buses perspective, I think we already see that electric buses are around, and that shouldn't be so much of a problem. They run on fixed routes, and it is possible for buses to easily shift. I think large commercial vehicles still some time away. Because the kind of payload that they would need to carry only in terms of carrying the batteries around and how would that work out is something we'll have to see. Also, many of these trucks move long distances, and therefore the ability to set up infrastructure to be able to charge these trucks within the required time, these huge batteries on these trucks within the required time, would take some time to set up. Obviously, there are a few other solutions which would lend themselves better for medium and heavy commercial vehicles. So I would say that it may not be as easy as soon for very large commercial trucks to move completely electric.
Right. I think that's an interesting point. Like you said, buses have a fixed route. So you could technically, theoretically, I think to throw back to what Mr. Maini said earlier, you could even look at various battery packs suited for different bus routes. Do you think that's, Mr. Maini, a solution that you could actually offer to, let's say, buses? Customized battery packs depending on route, or is that too much of a specific thing to do?
Well, our experience, we've done over 500,000 kilometers using swappable batteries for buses. And we were able to, instead of using a 3.5-ton battery, use a 650 kilogram battery, right? So, 5 times lighter, and you swap multiple times because anyway, people after 3 hours take a break. And so if you're taking a 5-minute break, you can swap a battery, 5 minutes and continue, right? So the idea is that it's reduced your upfront asset by 5x, right? And it's also really lightened the vehicle by 3 tons, which means 10 to 15% more energy efficiency, right? In terms of the heavy duty commercial vehicles, I don't think it's a technology challenge. It's about getting the right solution, right? The low-hanging fruit exists in 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, right? And so people are jumping on that area on this front before they get to the larger commercial vehicles. I do believe that in larger commercial vehicles, a strong network and a solution around battery swapping can be very helpful, right? And clearly demonstrated where even, from a car industry point of view, companies like NIO between Shanghai and Beijing have at every 200 kilometers set up a swap station. So suddenly you're able to do a very large distance by swapping every 3 hours in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and moving on, right? So if you were to look at highways and say, okay, here's Delhi, Agra, here's Delhi, Jaipur, Bombay, and all of them, and say, okay, we create the right infrastructure that can support it and have common platforms, right? But that does mean a lot of stakeholders have to come together, right? And so therefore the inertia is much higher there. But as a business, it is very feasible. And trucks use the most amount of energy, which means the impact from energy and environment, they would have a very large impact and would make business sense with the kind of diesel prices we have today, right? But it's about probably a lot more investment and all players coming together. You need players who are saying we will switch to electric. You need the highway solutions to say we will have swapping infrastructure in place. And of course, in those areas, uninterrupted power, which is going to be very critical on this front, right? But it's not a technology challenge. It's just where do we play first? And I think we play first in areas where it's easy for market. So goods 3-wheelers, passenger 3-wheelers, and 2-wheelers would probably be the first area. And then slowly through all the sector segments would move in as we move along the chain.
Right. No, thank you so much for that. And, I will just take maybe 2 more questions from our guests. Because I think we are running very short on time. There's been a question here that says, is the government's push on ethanol also maybe a diversion, like let's say hybrids that we were discussing earlier, or do you all think it's a good idea? What would you prefer to see? Open to any one of you would like to take that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, right? It obviously makes it a little bit cleaner, but it is also largely dependent on sort of our sugar and sugarcane ecosystem, and to provide an alternate usage for that. So it's extremely involved in terms of the geopolitical aspects and the import export aspects. It's not necessarily just like EV, from a clean perspective. This is a lot to do with sugar and how do you find alternate use case for sugar. So is it good, is it bad? I do not know, but from the sound of things, looks like we will have to do this. So I think we are all internally figuring out the economics and how to get it done and what percentage, and we will make our representation through CM and other bodies onto the percentages. I think the percentages are a point of discussion and debate today, not so much the whether or if, but it's different. I think it's not necessarily just to auto industry. Auto industry is now going to become a absorber of the excess sugar that we will be producing. And it's too much to do with farm economics. So I am not an expert on this.
Fair point.
Refrain from commenting further.
No, but that's an interesting point that you made, that yes, there are now other factors also involved. And Mr. Maini, do you think, it's, I mean, ethanol essentially keeps ICE engines going. It's essentially the same technology, right? It's internal combustion. Do you think that poses a challenge for then the EV ecosystem around, which is trying to push a completely different technology? Do you think ethanol might be a diversion?
It's not divergent. I think you've got an existing fleet. Even if everything went electric tomorrow, you have a fleet of over like 200 million vehicles on our roads, right? So what do you do for that? So I think there is something about how do we make the current fleet cleaner,
also clean,
and how do we make the new fleet completely clean? So I think we have to do both on this area.
Right. I think, yeah, perfectly said. In fact, that kind of answers the second question I was going to take also, which was a question to all the panelists here from one of our guests is, or rather, should we encourage conversions, retrofitting of older vehicles? But I think you kind of answered that. You have another solution in ethanol rather than go down a
well, no, I think there is an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity in three-wheelers, for example. I think we have a lot of vehicles that are 10-year plus on this front. And I think there's an opportunity where retrofit kits can enable those areas that can go maybe another 5-7 more years. It also enables, so it allows us to get the dirtiest vehicles off the road, where, and go from, Euro 2 level to, fully electric overnight.
Right.
The impact is huge. And if the policy in the country is saying we're going to spend a certain amount to reduce a certain amount of pollution, the biggest bang for the buck would be actually on the retrofit side. So I do think that having a retrofit policy, which could be supported at the central government level, augmented the city level to get the really polluting vehicles out, right? And either give them an option to retrofit and upgrade it, or give them an incentive to go for a new electric on this area, one of the two, by giving them a scrappage allowance, would enable us to get rid of those vehicles. And so I do believe there is a role in the short term. In the short term, I think long term it'll go away, but in the next 3 to 5 years, we could possibly electrify over 1 million vehicles around retrofit on just three-wheelers. And that pollution reduction could be huge. And that target that India is trying to meet could be accelerated also.
Right. No, thank you so much.
I will unfortunately leave, but thanks so much,
please,
guys. Really nice to, thanks, Autocar Professional. Great to catch up with you, Anand and Suman. Take care.
Bye. Yeah, thank you. And with that, I would like to also thank our other panelists, Mr. Anand Kulkarni, Suman Mishra. You've certainly thrown out a lot of food for thought and a lot of ideas. Thank you so much for the time. We know it's a very busy day for everyone, but you spent a good, I think, 2 hours with us. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Sergey.
Thank you very much.
Right. And I will now hand over to my colleague Mayank Dingra, who will lead us into, of course, the technical sessions. Mayank, over to you.
Thank you, Sergius. You rightly said, a lot of food for thought, and that was quite an incisive panel discussion. And I'm sure our audience got a lot of takeaways from the transition to ICE to EVs. And with that, let's proceed to the technical presentation. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all once again to the day 1 of the Autocar Professional EV Forum. And we shall now get into the technical presentation session. And for the day today, we have 2 presentations lined up. First up, we have a presentation from Varroc on the topic Varroc's journey towards electric vehicle localization. And for that, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Pramod J. Chaudhary, Head of Advanced Engineering at Varroc India. Mr. Chaudhary heads the Advanced Engineering team and leads the development of EV components and subsystems at Varroc. He has graduated with a master's degree in Systems and Controls Engineering from IIT Bombay and has been associated with the automotive industry for more than 15 years. Before I hand it over, I would request our attendees to share their questions in the Q&A box, and we will take them up after the presentation gets over. We have 2 presentations over the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes. So over to you, Pramod.
Hey, thanks, Mayank. I'll just share my screen.
It's visible.
Yeah, thank you. So hi, I'm Pramod. I head Advanced Engineering Group at Varroc, and today I'm going to talk about the initiatives we have taken at Varroc to localize the supply chain for electric vehicles. A brief introduction about the company. Varroc is basically a leading Indian auto technology group. It was founded in Aurangabad in 1988 and has been successfully listed on stock exchange in July 18. We have a strong and a long-lasting relationship with most of the major OEMs globally. We are a well-diversified global automotive components, and we are diversified across geographies, products, and customers. We have 43 manufacturing locations, 14 R&D centers, and 15 R&D centers across the globe. We have about 1,000 plus R&D engineers, 162 patents granted globally, and strength of about 13,000 plus employees globally. Varroc India business is into basically polymers, electricals, and metallic auto components for 2, 3, and 4 wheelers. For 2-wheeler, I believe we are one of the largest suppliers in India. And Varroc Lighting System is a global supplier of exterior lighting systems to passenger car OEMs. So coming to a topic we are going to talk about today, over last couple of years, Varroc has been working over series of solutions for electric vehicle applications. So we have a PMSM traction motor, motor controller, DC-DC converter, throttle position sensors, TFTs, BMS onboard charger, and telematics. And all of these are kind of we are offering to our customers. And today we are going to talk about some of these offerings. So we have so Varroc basically aims to become a supplier for system supplier for powertrain, and we have developed a traction motor as well as controller that is suitable for 100 125 cc equivalent motorcycle and scooter. So this is a PMSM motor with 48 volt system with 5 kilowatt peak power. 7,500 RPM max speed, and motor efficiency is 95%. Controller is at 98%. This got CAN communication. It's got a couple of other IOs, so it's suitable for both architectures where there's a VCU present or in cases where VCU is not present, and this controller can basically take care of supervisory functions as well and directly communicate with the sensors and actuators. It's a fairly compact motor, 7.5 kgs, and it has field-oriented control. Now, talking about the USPs of this this offering, Varroc is one of the very few suppliers globally which have development manufacturing capability of both motor and controller. So these are kind of made for each other. Both of these products have very high efficiency. Also, basically, since we have in fact set up a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Aurangabad for traction motor, and we are kind of very close to starting production. For controllers, again, we have very good development facility as well as testing facility. We have an in-house EMI, EMC, etc. that kind of helps us kind of expedite the development and also customize the solutions for our customers very quickly. And we have a world-class SMT facility with child part traceability. And we also have a very competitive supply chain for electronics. We are one of the largest buyers of electronic components, and that basically kind of helps us in basically building economies of scale. Now, on the previous slide, what you saw was a PMSM motor. There are other technologies as well, which are kind of contenders for two-wheeler, three-wheeler application. We believe PMSM would probably be the technology of choice for two-wheelers, where packaging is a constraint, but for three-wheelers, there are kind of, we are exploring opportunities of developing motors which do not require permanent magnets. So couple of them are basically the reluctance synchronous motor and switch reluctance motor. So we are in process of basically developing these solutions as well for our customers. The next product is a DC-DC converter. This is a 48 volt device, and it basically we have various variants of this for 10, 20, 30 ampere. Similarly, this is a what you see is a 48 volt device, but eventually we'll scale it up to 96 volts. So we will have solutions available for all applications from 48 to 96 volts and say 10 to 30 amperes. This got a high efficiency of 93%. It's IP67. It's got a compact size that complies with regulatory requirements. It has inbuilt protection for overcurrent, short to ground, over temperature, reverse polarity, input and output over voltage. A USP of this thing that this is a very rugged product that we have made to handle all the vehicle level stresses, and again this is designed and developed locally and is scalable to meet the customer requirement. And we have made sure that it basically meets all kind of automotive requirements, and ensured that whatever components we use in all the products, not just this, but all the products that we made, they are basically auto qualified. The next product that I have is basically Varroc connected solution or telematics. And here also we have the complete solution for our OEMs. There's hardware which basically goes along with the system. Then there's a platform which has powerful APIs to integrate with DMS and ERP. Then there's a mobile app which can be white labeled for the OEMs, and it's available as SDK and apps for iOS and Android. And then there's analytics, which can basically generate various reports, etc., for the customer. Here are some of the use cases. It can be used for emergency alerts for safety in case the vehicle topples. It sends out an alert. Then vehicle security, it has live tracking as well as geofencing. Driver report, driver behavior. It basically generates alert in case of harsh acceleration, hard braking, etc. And it also rates a driver how good or bad the driver is driving. You can analyze the movement of the vehicle as through trip analysis. This is a kind of a common solution for electric vehicle as well as IC engine. So at some places you would see wherever the data is available over the CAN bus about engine, that data also we are kind of capturing. These are the details about the Varroc telematic control unit hardware. And it's got a GSM 4G as well as 2G support. It's got eSIM support. We have Bluetooth IP67 compliant, very low standby current, CAN connectivity. Except for the GSM GNSS module, all components are auto grade, and it's got the standard automotive protection of a wide operating voltage, load dump, and EMI INC. This is about the app, which can be kind of, this platform can be customized for various use cases. What you can see is the app can be customized for in case it's being given to a owner, individual driver, a rickshaw, a fleet, insurance customers, bikers, as well as delivery guys. Also, there is opportunity for a lot of prognostics and health management in EV. For example, for traction motor, stator winding insulation failure can be predicted using phase current waveforms. Bearing failure can be actually predicted. For the battery's capacity and remaining useful life, prediction of the module and the overall battery can be done, and we can identify weaker modules. Typical use cases would be basically the system can give an advance warning to the user before a critical breakdown of a part, and thereby increasing the safety of the system. It also kind of helps in preventive maintenance and move away from basically fixed schedule maintenance or a breakdown maintenance. Then we have got EV life. EV battery life can be predicted, and also some parameters can be tuned to in case to basically optimize the life. And supply chain can be optimized based on basically the predictions that we get from the system. These are some of the advanced topics which we are working on, and we expect to basically offer these to our customers shortly. Now, in order to offer these solutions, we are equipped with all the required tools, etc., for doing 2D as well as 3D electrical machine FEA, thermal simulations, and algorithm development, auto code generation, model-based development, rapid control prototyping. We have a good library of component models that we used in our model-based development, and depending on basically the end use or the requirement or the application, we can use appropriate level of fidelity of the model to achieve the objective. We also have a lab which is equipped with critical important equipment for development testing, like a dynamometer. We have also in-house EMIMC facility. We have a state-of-the-art SMT manufacturing facility in Chakan. At present, we are using 7 lines of this facility, and we have space to basically expand it to 30 lines as basically demand increases. Similarly, we have a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility, automated manufacturing facility for traction motors set up in Aurangabad. And as you can see, we basically are kind of trying to address all the important subsystems and components for electric vehicle. So in fact, we have built a technology demonstrator vehicle that basically uses all our Varroc products for customers to have a first-hand experience. So we have this electric vehicle has PMSM traction motor, controller, DC-DC converter, TFT instrument cluster, telematic system, charger, LED projector, headlamp, tail lamp, switches, body panels. These are all made by Varroc. And with this, we believe we probably will kind of help in localizing the complete supply chain, and localizing not in terms of manufacturing, but also designing it and serving our customers with quick turnaround time. That's all I had. If there are any questions, I can take them.
Thank you very much, Pramod. That was a very insightful presentation. So the questions, though, have already started pouring in. I would still request our audience, they can go to the Q&A box and type in their queries, and I will happily take them with Pramod. So Pramod, first question from Mr. Dharmik Kothari. He wants to understand, considering the electric two-wheelers in India, so which is a better idea, battery swapping or charging?
I think both will probably will exist, and I think swapping would, to a large extent, will also depend on basically standardization, because individual OEMs trying to basically build a swapping system is going to be a challenge. So it's not a kind of a standard cut and dried solution. Either this is better or that. I think it would also kind of, if the industry is able to standardize on a battery, makes it easy to kind of swap the batteries. But my belief is that I think both would continue to coexist for some time.
Okay. There's the next question from Mr. Deepak, and he wants to understand how do you see the benefit with high power and low weight when you talk about axial flux motors?
So axial flux motors, basically the main advantage with axial flux motors is the power is the form factor that they come up. They are like kind of a pancake shape. So the places where basically the diameter is higher and the actual length is lesser, those applications they definitely have they are more suitable. Now it would depend on how you package. So basically whether the axial flux motor is suitable or not, that depends on your packaging strategy, where you are trying to place it. If you're trying to place it mid on the frame somewhere, it may not be very suitable because in the middle of the frame you will have the battery and a lot of other stuff. So you in fact don't have the amount of diameter that you have. You'll probably have a more axial length there. If you want to put it on a wheel similar to a hub motor kind of thing, then probably it might be suitable, because in a wheel that form factor kind of helps, where you've got a very low stack length and a large diameter. So it would, and typically these have been used in hybrid applications, where basically along with the flywheel they have been used with in the IC engine driveline. But that's a very good application, because you don't have to kind of move around a lot of stuff, and with a thin slice you can basically insert it in the driveline. So it would basically depend on, they are definitely compact, but I think it would depend on the packaging requirements of the OEM, whether it's suitable or not.
Sure. Mr. Venkatesh wants to understand, the inverters used by you, are they locally produced in India?
Yeah, they are locally produced. They are manufactured in our plant in Chakan. So all the semiconductors, unfortunately, we don't have any Indian suppliers of ICs, so they are definitely imported. But the design as well as production is in-house.
Sure. Next question from Mr. Jinesh, and how does the PMSM motors differentiate from current motors in the market, and wouldn't BLDC motor be more relevant for less than 4 kilowatt application?
So again, that would depend on basically what you want to do with your motor. If it's going to go into applications where speeds are high, in that case, PMSM would probably be a better choice. If you are, let's say, using it for a motorcycle, which goes up to, let's say, a 100 kmph kind of speed equivalent of an IC, people are used to driving an IC engine too, then probably BLDCs may not be the best choice there, because you can't do a field weakening till that speed. PMSMs would probably be a better choice there. But if you are probably making a delivery vehicle which goes up to like say 25 or 45 kmph, those kind of application, the control is much simpler, and BLDC can be a option there.
Sure. Pramod, you showcased your the entire portfolio that you've localized for the Indian market. So there's one question regarding what percentage of the powertrain is localized by value?
See, value, you would, it would be kind of, I would not be able to kind of give it as a percentage of the value, but there are certain sources which don't exist. So only those items which don't exist in India, we don't have suppliers in India, for example, ICs for the controllers. Then you have got magnets, rare earth magnets. I think these are the two critical things which are kind of imported. I think everything else is localized.
Sure. I would like to take one last question from Mr. Aditya Bansal. Can we see the dependence on rare earth permanent magnets reduce in two-wheeler traction motors going forward?
Two-wheeler, one of the critical requirements is basically packaging, because you have very limited space and you want to package a lot of stuff in there. And rare earth basically gives you this advantage that these are very, very compact motors. So I think it would take some time before you find a really compact motor which can give you the equivalent power and let's say a power equivalent to an IC engine, and it still fits into that small space. So PMSMs are going to be there for some time. Other applications like auto rickshaw, where you have some packing space, I think those will be the ones to move away from PMSMs. And PMSM also being a relatively more kind of mature technology, that is something which people will start with and gradually kind of move towards other technologies.
Sure. I think Sonal Sharma also had a similar query. So I think Mr. Sharma, you also have you've got your answer that just been given by Pramod. So on that note, Pramod, thank you very much for taking us through this presentation and taking the queries from the audience. And I hope we've answered all the questions considering the time limitations that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, man, for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we would like to proceed to the next presentation from CBROS on the topic CBROS powering the deep connected ecosystem. Again, a very warm welcome to Mr. Shivalik Prasad, the Vice President at CBROS. Mr. Shivalik serves as the VP of Sales and Strategic Alliances with a focus on Asia Pacific and European markets. Prior to CBROS, he served as
Mike, I think we lost you. Mike, you're on mute.
Mayank, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Right. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Apologies for the technical glitch. And I would again give an introduction to Mr. Shivalik. He serves as the VP of Sales and Strategic Alliances with a focus on Asia Pacific and European markets at CBROS. Prior to CBROS, he served as the Executive Director and Board Member for MapMy India, where he helped scale the business, partnering with major automotive clients, including BMW, JLR, Mahindra, Hyundai, and Tata Motors, among others. We would again follow the same drill. Any questions that you have, you please type them in the Q&A box, and I would take them with Mr. Shivalik once he's done with the presentation. So with that, over to you, Mr. Shivalik.
Thank you, Mike. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so my presentation will be very different from the ones prior, and it will extend to what Chetan and team were speaking about. So we are a very young company. We're only 3 years old. Been in business since 2018. Head office out of San Jose in California. The core founding team of this company comes out of Tesla, and these were the people that built Tesla's OTA, or over-the-air software update system and data collection system, for which Tesla is very well known globally. We are one of the fastest growing automotive software company. So we are purely an automotive software platform, and exponentially growing. We have signed up in the last year and a half around 14 plus OEMs for what we are doing. So who are we? So we are head office out of the US and multiple locations. Myself and a few others are based in Mumbai. We have a team in Pune. We have an office in Tokyo in Japan, and we'll have a European Technical Center sometime this year. So the question that came up prior in the opening technical call was, where do EVs go? And what is happening is there is a lot of commoditization of the product that is happening. So you have drivetrain or BMS, and a lot of these things are going to get standardized as time goes forward. And what CBROS is doing, we are the software layer sitting between the hardware and the cloud on these connected vehicles, right? And this could be a scooter, a motorcycle, a three-wheeler, an auto rickshaw, a small truck, big truck, mobility vehicles, all kinds of vehicles, right? And the idea is using software and a system, you're able to differentiate your product offering. Either it's a mobility or a shared mobility, or if it is a personalized vehicle that is being used, right? So we have two components of our software. One component is something that sits on the cloud or on the server. So we are integrated now with Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And on the in-vehicle piece, our software runs on a series of different chipsets, such as NXP, Renaissance, Infineon, STMicro, etc. From a compliance point of view, as these vehicles are becoming connected, one of the big topics that does not get discussed a lot is cybersecurity, because you are driving these vehicles at 100 kilometers an hour and 120 kilometers an hour, and let's say you get hacked. So we are part of a consortium, and it's a framework called Optane. It's one of the new global standards coming out. If you guys are in the EV space, I would highly recommend you to read up about it. Optane tells you how a connected vehicle should work, how you should recalibrate your vehicle, your ECUs, etc.
Our software is ASIL-D, ISO 26262 ASIL-D compliant, which is the highest functional safety rating today. Brakes or airbags have that. So since we are, managing the software of the vehicle, we have gone for an ASIL-D solution. We are Automotive Spice software compliant, UL certified, and all of this leads to something which you will see on my screen, which is called WP29. I would recommend you read that also if you get a chance. These are the new generation UNEC guidelines. India has a signatory to it. It basically will roll out in a few years, and it tells you how connected vehicles have to work. How do you collect data from a vehicle? How do you update software systems? What privacy guidelines do you take? How do you take consent? So a lot of those things don't exist today in the Indian automotive ecosystem. But WP29 is a global standard, and that is also coming to India. So anyone who's in the EV space has to kind of comply with that, and the Indian AIS standards will also be published shortly. So what are we doing, and what does Sibros do, and why are we growing so rapidly, and what problem are we solving, right? So as the world is going electric, vehicles are getting connected, and a lot more software is getting put into the vehicle, right? So if you just look at this 2018, this is almost 3 years ago, half the recalls that happened were related to software, right? The next question that comes in is, as you're putting in more tools, more suppliers, more BMS and different parts that you're bringing in, how do you ensure that your software is up to date? In the world of mobile phones or in the world of OTT, our phones get updated all the time, right? And we keep reading about it, we keep updating it. How do you make sure cars are updated? So today, if let's say I have a vehicle and it's a 4-year-old vehicle, I don't have Android Auto, or I don't have a navigation from Google on my system, but my hardware supports it. So if the vehicle was connected, and it is connected, and if I was able to update it, I should be getting new features on it. So especially in the case of EV, as your batteries start degrading, after some time, you have to constantly recalibrate your battery management system and many other functionalities related to that. So that becomes very, very hard. The next question that you will keep reading about is, data is the next, oil and those kind of things. What data do you collect, and how do you customize that? So, for example, I'm based in Mumbai. It rains a lot here compared to other parts of India, and all our wiper configurations are same for every vehicle in this country. Why is that, right? So I should have gotten a personalization of my vehicle where my wiper setting was changed because it rains a lot for 4 months, and then it changes again. And then that could have been done from a software functionality of a feature that you could have pushed from the cloud and into the car, or if you're driving a bike, if I'm going off-roading, if I have sensors or software in my vehicle, I should be able to get a different suspension setting, for example. So, if I'm going off-road, I get a different suspension. When I come onto a tar road, I get a different suspension, and that should happen on its own. So a lot of these things are not done in India, even in the luxury OEMs, but it is going to be rapidly deployed, and every vehicle will get customized for individuals' needs. Today, it's still very generic. Everyone gets the same product, but that is going to change, right? And Subros is part of that journey. So if you look at this is a very interesting stat. There are about 100 to 250 million lines of software code which is coming into electric vehicles because of autonomous driving and connectivity features. So today, when we look at connectivity, all we say is vehicle tracking, and I was part of that journey about 10 years ago. But connectivity means much more, right? So, for example, if I have an accident, I would like to know why the accident happened, and it could be a driver-driven. I have a driver who could drive the car, or a self-driven, or the insurance company wants to know it. And you would want to know, okay, if the accident happened 1 minute before the accident and 1 minute after the accident, I want to know how many people were wearing seatbelts in the car, how many people were in the car, what was the brake position, the pedal position, if I have an ADAS on the vehicle, what was the ADAS definition, and was there a thermal event on the battery of the vehicle, right? And I can collect all the data from different CAN messages in the vehicle or Ethernet messages, package it, and I can take a snapshot every 10 milliseconds. So I can literally recreate the accident, right? And that's not done by anyone today. Sibros will make that available. Right? If you look at another stat, so almost 350 million vehicles will get OTA, over the air enabled vehicle, where you can connect the vehicle and get all kinds of new software features into your vehicle. So more and more as time goes forward, vehicles become more and more software defined. BS6 was a good entry point from an Indian perspective in two-wheelers in IC engine side, and EV it's definitely happening, right? But the interesting thing is most of the OEMs are not designed to think from a software point of view. Most of it is still very mechanical, but that's something that is changing, and it's rapidly changing. So if you look at it, again, from a software first mentality, just from a recall perspective, about 90 million vehicles were sold worldwide in 2018. 30 million vehicles were recalled. That's a very big number. 15 million was just software recall. And if you just look at it from a 2022, 2 years out, almost 75 billion vehicles will be connected. So if you look at many of the big OEMs, even in the Indian market, including the two-wheelers that are being launched by many OEMs, or the three-wheelers or four-wheelers, they're all getting connected. So this is what we are doing, and this is very interesting, and this is literally cutting-edge technology. I have been part of this company. It's fascinating what we are doing, and including the big German OEMs and the big Japanese OEMs are nowhere near it. And the beauty is we are working in the Indian market all the way down to scooters and motorcycles. So there are three main components on a software-defined vehicle. That is the bridge between the ECU or the sensors in the vehicle and the cloud or the internet. The first one is something called a debug updater, which allows you to basically recalibrate and push any new software functionality into the vehicle on demand, right? So if I want to change the intensity of my lighting, if I want to change my wiper settings, I want recalibrate my BMS. I am working with, let's say, Amazon or Flipkart. It is Diwali, and I want to increase my my torque because I'm giving more load and I want to reduce my range. So it should all be done seamlessly on demand, right? The other thing is I want to log all kinds of data. So if I'm going for homolocation, I'm going for export markets, I want to log, how my vehicle is performing in 41 degrees or 46 degrees in Jaipur, and how does it perform in 98-degree humidity, 98% humidity in Chennai. So I should be able to log any kind of data on demand in a cost-effective manner because I can't spend that kind of money. And the third one is I should be able to run any kind of commands. So the idea is, why do we need diagnostic tools and why do we need service centers also, right? These vehicles are connected. So there is a DTC that gets generated on the vehicle or a diagnostic trouble code or some message that gets generated. And as long as it's electronic or electrical, I should be able to pick it up, take it to the cloud, run it through a machine learning engine, and make those relevant calibrations or rechecks into the vehicle. So that's something what we build in the command manager. So the idea is in a few years, and we are going to go live with this with a customer of ours in UK, where I should bring a vehicle, I should just scan the VIN number and say, okay, this is the history geography of this vehicle, these are the things it's done. And then now look at the use cases, right? If you have all the logic and all the data, you want to create a second-hand market for two-wheelers or four-wheelers in a structured manner. Where today someone says, okay, if he's a doctor, his vehicle is going to be priced higher. If he's a young guy who's reselling his vehicle, I will not give him that kind of money. So it's very ad hoc. But using data and logging the data, the OEM and the user can collect the data and say, hey, I drove really well for the last 4 years. I basically go from my home to office. I don't accelerate too much. My batteries are well managed. I want to to give me a higher price. Or things like from a charging point of view, let's say the vehicle had an accident. You are concerned, or the OEM is concerned, that when the vehicle is being charged, maybe the cells in the vehicle may have gotten damaged. So I want to log the battery temperature every time the vehicle is going in for charging. And if the temperature, let's suppose, about 42 degrees, I want to disconnect the charging and send a message that, hey, there is an issue. We would like to change your battery cells. Or if there's no issue, it's all fine. Next 3 months, we just want to monitor it, and the computer will keep monitoring it for you. So a lot of these things are not done today. And these are not, these will have to be done as the market becomes more and more complicated and more competitive. And then we have a whole bunch of products on the cloud side, which we give to the OEMs to basically level the playing field. So basically, anyone who's coming into the EV world and you're building a mobility vehicle with the Sibra software layer sitting in the middle of it, you should be as good or as bad as any other OEM. Then it's your design and your fine tuning and your marketing which will give you the differentiation. But we will basically remove we will standardize the software there. And that goes to the cloud. The cloud is nothing but an extension of the OEM cloud, where we will basically give you integrations if you have backend systems, and if you have applications or apps, etc., that you're building, parking, payments, tolling, all kinds of things on the front end side. So that's what we're doing on a deep connected platform. It's really, really, becoming very, very popular globally. We have won a lot of business over the last year and a half. We have a different business model. We run it as software as a service. So we standardize it, and that's the reason why we're growing so fast. So again, holistic solution, is the only solution in the market. Including, we are now entering the Chinese market sometime next year, and we have not seen anything like this in the world. Right? There are pieces of this solution done by many, many OEMs and many, many tier ones, but no one does this end to end except maybe Tesla. A little bit about our team. So our CEO and co-founder, he was one of the principal architects at Tesla who helped build Tesla's OTA and data collection system. He founded this company about 3 years ago, and his vision was, why, if the vehicle is connected, why can't we standardize the software, right? And give that option to the OEM where they don't have to spend millions of dollars, to make any changes. And that's the vision we started with. And the idea was we support two-wheelers, four-wheelers, tractors, buses, trucks, level 3, 4, 5 autonomous vehicles. Many of these pictures that you see from California or in Europe, they run our software stack. Mayank, again, who's our CTO and co-founder, came out of a company called Faraday Future. He's a subject matter expert on gateway systems and battery management system from software perspective. Annie again came from the Tesla side of the world. Preet, who's our VP of firmware. He was one of the early engineers who helped build Tesla's energy farms across US and Hawaii and Australia. He's also a lecturer, teaches real-time operating systems. Myself, I came from a mapping background. I built a company called Map India prior to this. And Steve Shinky, the guy who's one of the first member of something called GM OnStar. So this was a connected system that GM has. I think they still have 29 billion plus connected vehicles live today. And our most famous guy is this person called Xiaojun Wang. His claim to fame was he built the entire connected platform for Uber, which had 61 plus million connected vehicles. And just to give you perspective, if you have so many connected vehicles piping, terabytes of data every minutes, it's very hard to manage that. And for most of the OEMs, it's very, very hard, especially even in India, right? If you have used apps on your car booking, etc., other than Swiggy and Zomatos of the world, which are very, very nice, most of the apps struggle the moment they get above a particular level. So we have standardized it again. And the idea is to make software as a service for connected EV vehicles happen. So that's pretty much it from my side. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Great. Thank you so much, Shivalik. I think that was a brilliant presentation. And he really gave us a deep dive into what, what's really coming our way in terms of connected technology inside cars. Already we are seeing a lot of companies, OEMs in India also offering these connected car features. And I want to get a sense from you. So do you think that going forward, really, these are the kind of things that customers are really interested in?
Yeah, so if you look at it, so what does the customer look for, right? Customer looks for convenience. That is the primary number one criteria, right? And whatever anyone says about mobility, and I've also been part of the auto industry for about 20 plus years across the globe. If I have to buy a product for myself, it has to look nice, it has to fit in my budget, and it has to be convenient. And my vehicle should be fresh. So the old mantra of I bought a vehicle and I'm kind of done with it. I drive it for 7 years, and I sell it to someone else. He makes a taxi out of it, or he takes it in hinterland in India. That mantra is gone, right? Now the mantra is I bought a vehicle, and just like my mobile phone or my TV or my Kindle or my Fire Stick, I want my vehicle to be fresh with the latest and greatest feature that my hardware can support, right? And that we are seeing that in India. Otherwise, we are working with two-wheelers in India and tractor companies in India and truck companies, and the beauty is they're all getting connected. They all have some kind of a SIM card inside it. They already have a CAN network architecture sitting inside it. The question is, how can you leverage it and give new features? So, for example, I came from the mapping world, right? Why does an OEM have to load a map? I don't need a map every day when I go from home to office. But if I'm driving to Ladakh, yes, I would need a map, right? So give me an option to just pay as you go. Just pay, 20 rupees for the single user map for 5 days, right? Why does the OEM need to absorb that price of that navigation system inside the vehicle, right? So that's one example. The other example would be the example you give a Viper, right? Or the other example is BMS, right? If the OEM knows that, hey, this scooter of mine or this truck of mine is only driving from Mussoorie to Dehradun, and it's up in the hills, why do I need to give a different setting from a BMS? My algorithm has to be different. And the OEM has these algorithms. It's not that they don't have it. They just don't know how to get it to. So now it's connected, and using Sibros, I can give, an individualized, drivetrain basically. And that's beautiful. And that really differentiates.
Right, right. So even though we are really pressed for time, I'll just try and squeeze one question again from Mr. Venkatesh. He asks that, with connectivity also comes the big challenge of data security, cyber security. So what are the measures that you're taking on that front to ensure, privacy of data?
Yeah, so one is the privacy of data, where we take consent from the user, and the other one is actually getting hacked, right? So the example I told you was the Octane framework. I would highly recommend you read about it. It's a new cybersecurity framework which is going to be adopted globally by most of the OEMs. It tells you how it's like a bank locker kind of concept, right? So before you exchange any data, the data is encrypted, by the way, but before you exchange any data or you touch any ECU in the vehicle, vice versa, you have a security key from Sibros, you have a security key from the OEM, and you have a security key maybe from the customer himself, right? So you have multiple security keys, and so there are many levels of checks in place. And it's a very nice system. It's very similar to bank locker kind of concept, and we have implemented that, and that makes life easy for everyone.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shivalik, for your presentation and also for taking the queries. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so with that, we move to the next panel discussion, the panel 2, which is on the topic industry and government collaboration. So Sumantra, we've recently seen the PLI scheme finally getting, the specifics of it out from the government. The auto sector has got a really big amount, a big chunk of almost 26,000 crore rupees. So we would like to, understand from your panel now, how industry and government can work hand in hand to really make the EV ecosystem in India flourish going forward. So over to you with your panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayank. And indeed, very interesting and interesting set of technical and techno-commercial presentations, if I may call them, from the speakers there. Thank you very much. And as you rightly said, a good chunk, a good focus on the automotive industry in the recently announced PLI schemes. And as a leading OEMs leader also mentioned, it's like a technology-led incentive. So with a large focus, with a strong focus on clean mobility, in other words, electric mobility. So I think it's very good news for all the panelists, especially Mr. Naveen Munjal, who has been a strong proponent and investor for more than a decade, and Mahesh Babu, of course, being associated with the industry for long, and being now from ICE, he made a shift in his earlier organization to EVs, and now in an organization which is exclusively EVs, and that's very interesting. And so yes, looking forward to a very, very interesting and insightful conversation, and very valuable at that too, because of, as you mentioned, on the government's role. And government, of course, in any industry, in the growth of any industry, government plays a key role, regulations, policies. And in the automotive industry, as we all know, it plays a very crucial role. And when it comes to the electric mobility megatrend, the global electric mobility megatrend, it cuts across nations throughout the world. Wherever there is growth in the EV industry, there is a direct link to support from the government. Of course, it won't be there forever, but till the industry can stand on its own, I think it will be there. And that's what some of the countries like Norway and others are doing. And I'm sure some of these examples will also be cited in the panel, which is coming up very soon. So on that note, thank you very much, Mayank, for hosting the previous session. And now it's my pleasure and honor to welcome the panel. As my colleague said, the theme is government industry collaboration. The automotive industry always has seen a lot of collaboration. But when it comes to the electric mobility industry, the electrification megatrend has really sparked off a trend of collaboration like never before. So much so that it almost is becoming a norm when it comes to getting the critical scale and and looking for sustainable growth. So, and collaboration not only between and among industry players, but the crucial and critical collaboration between industry and government. And as we have recently said, as we have recently seen, before the PLI also, the FAME2 incentives which were tweaked, these were all done in consultation with the industry, and industry leaders like Mahesh Babu and Navin Munjal were very actively involved, giving inputs, and the government has also been receptive and kind of tweaked accordingly. So, and on that note, I would like to just share a few data points. According to a World Economic Forum report quoting the International Energy Agency, in 2020, ICE vehicle sales were down 16% globally, but electric vehicle registration of electric vehicles went up by a whopping 41%. Yes, in terms of absolute number, they're not, I mean, small, but in terms of the growth percentage, it's quite impressive, and it is perhaps a sign of things to come in this and the coming years as well. And consumer spending on EVs jumped 50% globally to $120 billion in 2020, again, according to the International Energy Agency. And anywhere that we see, I was just going through some research work, and I found that anywhere, any country where electric mobility has gained any considerable traction, it is with good support or collaboration with the government in terms of incentives and various other factors. And when it comes to our own country, we have seen with the first rollout of the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan in the about 88 years or so ago, and then the FAME1 in 2015, and then the FAME2, and now the tweaked FAME2, all making indicates and reflect the focus of the government in promoting tailpipe-free emission, in other words, electric mobility. And the focus is not limited only to the vehicles, but the entire infrastructure, the entire ecosystem, as has also been seen in the case of the one of the recent state EV policies, that is of Maharashtra state, which was rolled out in this year in July. So on that note, once again, let me formally welcome all the esteemed panelists. Mr. Navin Munjal, Managing Director of Hero Group, Mr. Mahesh Babu, recently appointed CEO of Switch Mobility India. Mahesh, congratulations and best wishes on your new role.
Thank you, Sumantha.
And Mr. Dev Ashish Aneja, lead EVs and auto for Invest India, which is part of the Ministry of Commerce, and Mr. Baldev Singh, Additional Chief Secretary, Industries, Government of Maharashtra. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sparing your time and joining in this panel discussion. Since the topic is on government and industry collaboration, let me start off with you, Mr. Singh. This is not the first time that Maharashtra has rolled out an EV policy. The first time, if I'm not wrong, was in 2018. And but now, this time, it's much more comprehensive, much more holistic, and very clear-cut targets. And some of them are very aggressive targets. Like, for example, you're talking about 10% of all new vehicle registrations in the state of Maharashtra to be electric by 2022. That's next year. So could you briefly tell us, what were the key insights, key learnings that you had from the first draft or the first EV policy, which was rolled out about 3 years ago under one particular ministry, but now this time 2-3 ministries are together. So what were the learnings? And this time, how do you plan to really make sure and execute them as has been laid out in the policy?
Thank you. Thank you. You have mentioned yourself, the focus has been shifted from 2018 to 2021. In keeping in view the response we got from the investors and from the industry, we thought it absolutely necessary to bring in more changes, to make it more aggressive, to attract more investments into Maharashtra. As you are aware, Maharashtra has been a leader in the electric components. We have more than 24% share in the output of testing, navigation, and control equipment so far auto sector is concerned. We have 28% share in the electric motor control apparatus that you are aware. And in other electrical equipments, we have more than 20% of the share in the India's output. And we already have the major auto players in Maharashtra. Before I speak about the electric policy and the special feature which we are offering now, the kind of incentive, I would also like to mention that Maharashtra, through the collaboration with Government of India, has already developed various nodes of the national corridor, the DMIC. And we are ready to welcome the investor. As you might be aware, we have our city in Aurangabad, which is offering the world's best infrastructure facilities. And we invite all the investors to come and see. In fact, we will be conducting road shows very soon on that. It's just because of the pandemic that the road shows have been delayed. Otherwise, it offers you the world's best infrastructure. The second corridor is coming very close to Bombay and very close to the Dighi port. And we are already in a very advanced stage where the land acquisition is almost complete. And we are setting up of the infrastructure and the master plan. So we'll also like to take you through our investors to that corridor, which is coming very soon. And the third corridor, which we have kept the electric sector in mind actually, is on the Bombay, Pune, Bangalore route near Satara, which is another 10,000 acres of land, which we are developing as a part of the Bangalore-Pune corridor, which will be ultimately part of the DMIC. So all investors are welcome to participate in that and bring their investments. About the EV policy, this time, the focus is not only on the manufacturing side, which of course Maharashtra is always strived for, because Maharashtra as a state is one of the manufacturing hub in the country, and we would always like to bring more investors into the manufacturing sector so that they have their permanent setup here and do their marketing, do their export from here. But market demand side equally has been focused this time. So you have a lot of subsidy available on the electric vehicle, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers. We have categorized into commercial and non-commercial categories where the incentives are again given, keeping in view the requirements. And the incentives are single touch point. We are giving it to the OEM, whom we are expecting he will pass it on to the ultimate consumer. The SOP has already been set up, the standard operating procedure, how to avail those incentive. And we have a single window clearance where the Directorate of Industries of Maharashtra has, through Maitri, if you might be aware, deals with all the application, all the approval, all the registration at one single point, and will be able to provide the incentive in a very, very quick fashion, I would say.
Okay.
And you will be also able to track the status of your incentive as and when you are entitled for that. Then we have also brought special focus on the development of the infrastructure, the charging station, both slow as fast on the national highways, in the residential community, in those housing societies, and in the various parts of the cities. And the special incentives for the development of the infrastructure for the charging station has been provided. The details are available, as people can see in the EV policy which we have already announced. And the third part, of course, is the manufacturing sector, which was our focus even in 2018. There, one of the major change we have brought in, that we earlier had those ABCD categorization where the incentives were linked to that. Now, for the electric vehicle sector as such, we have made one common category, that is D+, which means all the industry, whether it's setting up near Bombay or near Pune or anywhere they find the ecosystem is better for their requirement,
they get the same level of incentive.
They get the same incentive. which are qualified for the D+ category. So all these things are available, and our targets, as you have mentioned, are very ambitious, and we hope we should be able to achieve that. Not only achieve, we should be able to surpass that, because by April 2022, we are expecting all the government, semi-government vehicles will be replaced with the electric vehicle almost 100%.
Right.
So those kind of ambitious targets we have set, and like you have mentioned yourself, the battery of electric vehicle, we have set the target of 10% to be achieved in the registration, both in case of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and in case of commercial logistic players, mobility aggregators, the target we are setting up is around 25%.
Okay.
So all these incentives are available. You can have a look at. We will be very keen to reply to any queries if anybody has regarding availing of the incentive or the standard operating procedure.
Great. I think I'm sure during this session itself, we may have a query or two, at least from the industry leaders here. So in the spirit of the session's theme of government industry collaboration, let me come to Mr. Munjal. Now, from with increasingly states taking a very proactive role rather in facilitating the adoption of EVs. Now, I recall in one of our earlier conversations, you had mentioned, and while making our mid to long-term plans, a worst-case scenario showed you an industry size. I'm talking about two-wheeler electric of about 12 million, and a best-case scenario could be anywhere between 30 million. So now with these states rolling out EV policies, so which way is the needle pointing to?
Thank you so much, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I was very, Mr. Singh, congratulations on the Maharashtra policy, which is actually a very good one. So very thankful to you for pushing this. So while, and I've been saying this for a long time, it's very important for us to have long-term strong policies which propel us forward. Now, luckily, what's happened as of June this year is the FAME 2 policy has been amended. And that amendment helps electric mobility a substantial amount. It's a very good policy now. So I would say, I would rank it at a global level. It's one of the better policies that we have at a global level. Of course, we don't have the stick approach that a number of countries have. We have a carrot approach, but that carrot is a very good one from that perspective. On top of the state central policy, we've got a number of states which have come out with their very good policies and strong policies. And I'm very happy to see, I'm very glad to see a number of them actually are not only manufacturing led, but also demand creation. And that's something that we've been saying for a long time, that while you need to have strong manufacturing-led policies, you also need to create demand. If you create demand in your state, it is but natural that the ecosystem will begin to fall in place. And with that ecosystem falling in place, logistically, it would make sense for companies to come into that state. So you've got to, the first step is actually that of demand creation. And that demand creation happens in multiple ways. Like we've got Maharashtra policy, which is a good one. We've got Gujarat, which is a good one. We've got Delhi, which is a good one, which is not manufacturing led at all, because we don't have manufacturing in Delhi.
And therefore, the incentives, the incentive component in the Delhi policy is the highest at the consumer level among all states, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. That's right. Plus, so it's a good policy. And then we've got Rajasthan, and now we've got Assam, and we've got Goa. And so there are numerous other states also which are stepping in. And I'm glad to see them not shifting, but I'm glad to see supplementing the manufacturing-led policies with demand-led policies. Okay. So now what happens is, you were asking about the number and what the projections are. So basis the last conversation that we had, which is a while back, now basis that, the numbers have been upped, certainly, because of all of this action that's happening. Now, what's happening is that earlier, the market was a low-speed market. Effectively, it was a low-speed market, which was not getting financed to that extent. Now, there is a change, there's a shift that's happening. It's no longer a low-speed market. In fact, the market is going to switch to a high-speed market, or a city speed, as we define it. 45 to 55 kilometer speed vehicles, highly efficient in terms of pricing, very, very aggressively priced as against even an IC engine vehicle or a low speed. They're even cheaper than a low speed vehicle simply because of the subsidies in place now. So I would now think, if we were to do crystal ball glazing at this point of time, and if you look at the next 5-year scenario or where we could be, at a base case scenario, I think we could be at a base case about 20% of the total IC engine industry market. Now that 20% means 4 to 5 million units. It's no longer the 12 lakhs that I was talking to you about. This is 40 to 50 lakhs at a base case. Now, this number could dramatically shift up to a much higher number, given that certain other factors fall in place. Now, those factors are to do with one, financing, which is a very important one. It's falling in place, but it's not there yet. There is still a substantial gap there. Mandating is a very, very important one. I'm very happy to see the Maharashtra policy, which talks about 10% registration by 2022, and Delhi policy, which talks about 25% registrations by 2025. I'm very happy to see those results. How do you really implement those? That said, when we look at electric mobility, we've got to divide it up into different categories. All of them will not take off at the same time. The infrastructural requirements for each category are very different from each other. The infrastructure you require for cars is very different from what you require for two-wheelers, for example. What you need to do is mandate that every building, new or old, and it's not just for new buildings, even the old ones, should have basic 15 amp charging plug points where a person can plug in their vehicles. There are issues. Maharashtra, for example, if you look at Mumbai, where parking is a challenge. So when you're living in a block of apartments, where do you really park your vehicle and where do you charge your vehicle? So you've got to start mandating that even for older buildings, not just for the new ones. Number of factors when we have long-term policies. For example, if we said 2027 or 2026 as the date by which we are going to stop registrations of IC engine vehicles around the country, and this is, I'm talking about more about the two-wheelers. It'll be a different policy for three-wheelers or four-wheelers and larger vehicles. If we set concrete goals, then everything falls in place when you do a backward calculation from there. What are the infrastructure requirements? What are the supply chain requirements? Battery manufacturing, cells manufacturing, the charging infrastructure, financing, everything begins to fall in place once we have that concrete goal. Now, to give you an example of why that's important, is last year we came up with BS6 norms. Now, we switched from BS4 to BS6. There was a concrete date given, which was given at a thing to say that this is the cutoff date. So you start planning backwards. If we had no date in mind, if we didn't have 1st of April 2020 as a date, as a deadline, how many companies which have actually switched to BS6? So it is imperative for us to do that from an environmental standpoint. It is imperative from an oil importation standpoint. The cities need it. Coming winter, NCR is going to be under smog, unfortunately.
And also with the backdrop of the recent IPCC report.
Absolutely. So it's we need to move in that direction. A number of pieces of that puzzle are already in place because of the central policy, the states coming in. There are still some other pieces of the puzzle which also need to be plugged in.
Right. We'll come to that again. And as you rightly pointed out, different segments will have different and will need different kind of solutions, and the rate of adoption will also be different. But when it comes to the lead segments, it will be the same as in currently, that with two-wheelers on one side and commercial vehicles, mainly buses on the other side. So, Mr. Mahesh Babu, again, staying with Maharashtra, yesterday's announcement of Maharashtra government having at least nearly 2,000, about 1,900 buses, electric buses by 2023, must be music to your ears, right? So is that a kind of a focus segment for switch mobility also in India?
Yeah, absolutely, Sumantra. Firstly, good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations, Mr. Singh, for the Maharashtra policy, very, very progressive and futuristic policy. To start with, I think, Sumantra, you alluded that there is a lot of things happening around electric mobility in buses. I would only thank and appreciate Maharashtra for getting such a large order. No other state has given a tender of 1,900 buses, very comprehensive, 9 meter, 7 meter, 12 meter.
Very clearly defined.
Very clearly defined what is expected. I think a lot of experience, knowledge, and I would say a lot of things have gone into the BEST tender. So it clearly says that every area, the state government is understanding the technology, understanding the consumer needs, and understanding the futuristic climate goals, what is being done, and it's being committed at various levels. So I strongly believe that still the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, public transport is the one which is the focus in India, which I've been talking about for 6-7 years now. which Naveen knows. Both of us have been talking about this in various forums. India needs some transformative solutions on these segments, which is 2-3-wheelers, public transport, and the goods mobility or the last mile and mid-mile delivery segments. I think that's being addressed. Incidentally, we had a lot of challenges in tendering. The GCC type of tendering in buses, which also helps the STUs, Government of India and the industry, has actually created momentum in the bus sector. So if you look at FAME subsidy, FAME 1, FAME 2 has refined substantially and extended, as my colleague said, that there is a large amount of effort being put on demand side incentive, consumption by government itself, either state government or central government. Maharashtra is with a tender. Last week, there was a tender from Guwahati in Assam for similar buses, substantial numbers. Kerala is on a trend. BMTC just opened the bid and for 300 electric buses for Bangalore. So there is a substantial activities going. I think the credit goes on three fronts, I would say. One is the central government and the state governments working hand in it, whether it is a FAME scheme for demand, state government policies like Maharashtra and other states. The auto PLI scheme, I think we need to look at how 26,000 crore has been earmarked for the recent auto PLI scheme by the central government, very specifically towards EV and fuel cell vehicles. If you add the auto PLI scheme on top of the state incentives, industrial policy, let's say Maharashtra or any other state, I think a lot of focus can come for global players to come and invest in the state and the country is a very high chance. Look at ACC PLI, that's about 18,000 crore for advanced chemistry batteries for 50 gigawatt hour. So actually there is a complete momentum on demand on electric mobility, industrialization and local manufacturing, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India initiatives. R&D in India, like people like all of us developing IPRs in India on from two-wheelers till buses, I would say. I think the whole EV segment in India is at a very cusp of takeoff. We have been talking about it for 5 years from now, but I think the decade of this is going to be between 2021 and 30 is going to be the India's EV script written journey on takeoff. Till now, I think, having said that, there is a tremendous effort gone in the past 2 decades. We wouldn't have reached this stage without government, industry, and the consumer behaviors effort taken in the past 2 decades.
Starting with the NAMP.
Yeah, starting with NAMP. You are absolutely right. So tremendous efforts have gone, and what we are seeing today is the culmination of all the efforts come together. My only request would be that it should be taken properly and taken at a very, very, what I would say, scalable business model. We are
and
talking
execution
about,
as per plan.
And execution as per plan. So industry need to come in. The only left out right now is universities and the academia. So I am always started talking now. Government is in place now. Industry is aligned to the government support. Consumers understood what it is a need for EV. But we have to bring academia in, because if we have to sustain this globally as a country and as a state or whatever it is,
research
we need
will
to
be
bring
crucial.
in the academia, because we need to build up the knowledge pipeline. We need to build up the ecosystem to make sure that this momentum is sustainable and growable at multifolds.
Indeed, and you Mahesh, you have touched upon a very key aspect of academia. And while I know that, independently, there have been things happening at the academia, but yes, concerted efforts and academia becoming a critical part of such plans would really, really help a lot, considering that the EV industry is also in a very technology oriented, in a different level. So thank you very much for your thoughts there. And coming to Mr. Devashish Aneja, like Mr. Mahesh Babu was mentioning, all the efforts that are there at the central government level, state governments level, will only pave the way for the better adoption and better growth for the EVs and EV infrastructure in India, and therefore will attract a lot of interest from investors outside. Now, since you wear the hat of the auto and EV lead at Invest India, how is the kind of feedback that you get when it comes to investors, both within India and from overseas?
Sure, Sumantra. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure, of course, and taking a cue from the previous comments by industry stalwarts. So, we at Invest India, of course, are working with investors both overseas and in India, and we are seeing a tremendous amount of interest, specifically within the PLI ACC scheme, I would say. So, in the past, I would say 4 months, we have been engaging with with ACC investors across cell manufacturing, across supply chain, sort of cathode manufacturing, anode manufacturing. We are working with global funds who are willing to sort of invest into these consortiums which will be built into India for cell manufacturing. And then we are, of course, working with Indian companies who are looking to diversify and get into cell manufacturing space. So, as of now, the kind of Indian companies we are working with from an ACC perspective, fortunately, unfortunately, don't happen to be auto companies. Most of those are either energy companies or oil and gas sector companies or chemical companies, which are looking for these sort of partnerships. And from a cell technology perspective, I would say we as Invest India are working with 5+ companies, which are definitely considering the Indian market, which are having advanced level of discussions with prospective Indian partners. One of them has actually made some initial investments also into India, and we have been able to help them negotiate a good incentive package with the state of Karnataka to set up their 5 gigawatt-hour cell manufacturing plant. So this company is sort of building nickel-free, cobalt-free chemistries, and they are coming with their own cathode partners. So when I talk about ACC, the basic premise is we have to do a 60% value addition, which to a lot of people seems to be a big challenge. But having said this, we are working with some cell companies who are coming with their cathode partners to India to manage this thing of 60% local value add. And within the overall battery scheme of things, from cell perspective, supply chain perspective, greenfield, brownfield investments, we are working with investments of close to $4 billion, I would say. Out of these $4 billion, these are investments in the pipeline for the next 2 years. Of these $4 billion, about $1 billion would be in brownfield, balance 3 billion would be in greenfield. And most of these greenfield investments are one within the battery space, secondly within the infra space, wherein we are working with global companies across charging and swapping, majorly swapping side of things, and then thirdly across component side of things, which is the powertrain manufacturers. And lastly, surprisingly, we are seeing a lot of traction from Middle East also. We are extensively working with Middle Eastern investors who have a surplus deployable capital to be invested into Indian EV assets. So we are engaging with a lot of Indian EV startups who have reached a certain stage, who are hungry for capital, who are looking to raise big ticket size funds, and we have already executed a couple of those deals. Some of them are in the diligence phase. So even this kind of attraction is happening in the Indian market from Invest India's perspective.
That's you actually showed us a very clear picture about what the trend is when it comes to investment interest in India. And interesting to know that quite a few of the investors have little or no experience or background in the automotive industry, which shows the strength of the electric EV megatrend. And also, I mean, you said that the PLI, ever since the PLI was announced, the interest level there's been a spike in the interest level, right? So how much of these investment commitments have come ever since the PLI was announced?
So as I told, from a cell manufacturing standpoint, one of the companies has actually made initial investments of procuring small pieces of land, but of course they are waiting for the actual RFP document to come out, which is expected to come out in the next 2 weeks, basis which bidding will happen. But in the interim, what they have done is they have already sort of done a MOU with the state. They have finalized their incentive negotiations with states. They have finalized their joint venture partners in certain cases. Certain cases, advanced discussions are happening. But I would say only one cell manufacturing company has made initial investment, but they are committing $500 million for a 5 gigawatt-hour plant, which is the minimum scale to enter the PLI scheme. Then, in addition to this, there is one company within the anode manufacturing space which has sort of committed close to $50 million. which again, they have already started their plant construction in the state of Karnataka, which we are working with. But of course, this will be scalable to over $150 million in the coming years. But right now, in phase one, it's going to be a slightly smaller amount. Then, from a cathode perspective, we are working with a global German company, which is very serious on the Indian market. We are again doing advanced discussions on multiple things, but as of now, no investment has been grounded from that perspective. And then from an infra perspective, again, some investments, small investments have been grounded, but majorly it's all in the pipeline, which is towards swapping side of things.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good. Right.
And then lastly, from a brownfield investment perspective, I would say we are working, as I told earlier, we are working with some funds who do not necessarily belong to the auto industry, but they are looking to diversify within the mobility space as a whole, within the Indian EV space. So they are in advanced diligence stage. One of those funds has committed 100 million plus number to one of the cell manufacturing consortiums, prospective cell manufacturing consortiums in India.
Right.
And that fund has already given their final approvals. I mean, it's with the BOD for the approval stage, so it should be announced very, very soon.
Okay, that's good to know, and good to know about the interest level and the areas of investment. And cell and battery manufacturing, as we all know, is absolutely crucial in the whole effort of indigenization of the EV technologies in India. Mr. Singh, talking about that, since the focus of the Maharashtra government is also to ensure that the ecosystem, there's a thriving EV ecosystem in the state, and within which battery manufacturing or cell manufacturing becomes a very crucial part, because as we all know, in an EV, battery is the single most expensive and the most crucial component. So in that regard, have you received any kind of expression of interest or any kind of discussions with prospective investors who would like to invest in cell manufacturing, battery manufacturing for EVs in Maharashtra?
We are expecting very soon, because we are in talk with quite a few of them. And as you are aware, in the policy framework itself, we have laid special emphasis on the electric battery manufacturing. And as I mentioned at the very outset, that we are the leader in the lithium battery. So we hope that we will retain that leadership in the electric batteries as well. And about 2-3 other issues, I think Mr. Naveen Manjal mentioned about the demand side. So that's what we are trying to reassure, that we have placed special focus on the demand side. And in addition to that, when the demand is met and the vehicle is on the road, we are ensuring that the corresponding infrastructure for the recharging is existing. That special focus has been taken by the government of Maharashtra. And a lot of work will be starting on that very soon. And we are in touch with the Urban Development Department. They have already amended the development control rules to bring compatibility between what we require for the electric vehicle, whether it's a housing society, whether it's on the national highway, whether in the city area. I think Mr. Manjal also mentioned about the constraints being faced by the cities like Mumbai. So we are aware of that. That's why we are trying to work out alternatives so that the recharging should not be a constraint when we are talking about the electric vehicle. So all the commensurate changes in the urban development rules are either made already or are in the process, and they will respond to the increased demand. And the public sector, that's one of the reasons that the public sector transport, we have laid a special focus. We have set up very steep targets for the MSRTC, for the various urban local bodies, the city bus service which they are running, whether it's Pune or Mumbai or any other city like Aurangabad. So those issues have been focused on. And this is the first time that the government has taken onto itself that whatever incentives we have committed, we should earmark the funds upfront for that, so that we don't need to wait for the budgetary provisions as well. So that care has also been taken. In addition, the implication of where we have declared the single zone, the D+ zone. Now, any project above 100 crore is a mega status project, which you are aware under the package scheme of incentive. You are entitled to a lot of incentive on that basis if you are a mega status project. And any project beyond 1500 crores is an ultra mega project entitling much more incentive. So all that has been brought in line to focus on demand side, supply side, and creating the concurrent infrastructure which is required for meeting the targets of the policy. So we are very hopeful about the investments in Maharashtra. And we would like the support from Invest India and from the people who are participating here as well to work on what kind of projects they want. And we are very open to suggestion. We are very open to discussion to bring more investment into Maharashtra. Thank you.
That's indeed a very welcome approach of being open to suggestions, inputs, and perhaps that also reflects why the Maharashtra state government for EV policy has attracted some good reviews from industry leaders. I'm talking about the one which was launched in this July. So, Mr. Munjal, when we hear states like Maharashtra really making efforts towards having a manufacturing base also look. So how does it, I'm sure it's good news when you look at from, let's say, Hero Electric's overall long-term perspective, where you would like to have a wider manufacturing footprint nationwide. So what are the factors that we look at, when you come to finalize the location, prospective location, so to speak, for your future, let's say, manufacturing plant? Because I'm sure you do it many years before it actually, happens.
Thank you, Sumantra. I was very happy to hear Mr. Singh's comments about the infrastructure and how they're addressing those. It's a big challenge in a place like Mumbai, actually. But I'm very happy to see that the government is conscious of it and they're addressing those points. Also, the projects that are coming in the state and how the state is supporting them. Now, the way that we look at it, one of the primary factors is, of course, your demand in that state or around that state. And how quickly are you able to get your products from that state to wherever the demand pockets be. So that is one important factor. The others are proximity to the ports, because eventually when you're looking at these projects, you look at both importation and exports. So you look at it from an international perspective and not just from a domestic perspective. The other factors beyond that, what you look at is the infrastructure which is already existing there to support the kind of industry that we are setting up. So, batteries and all, of course, are not there at this point of time, but they will come in the near future. Transportation of those goods into your facility and from your facility on into the customers. So what are the costs involved with something on those lines? But beyond that, of course, there is factors like availability of good manpower, which is highly trainable. How conducive are the policies in that state for labor reforms, etc. And
skilling, maybe.
That is a very important factor, when you're looking at it from a long-term perspective. The reskilling of the workforce, how quickly can you do the reskilling of the workforce? Because that is, again, an important factor. And beyond that, how conducive is the state itself in terms of welcoming such investments? Are they looking at it from a long-term perspective? We do look at factors like, for example, is it going to be a capex or an opex model if you come into that state? If you're taking land from that state, you're developing that, you're reskilling the workforce, you're employing people, you've got all the things like benefits of electricity, power, taxation, GST, etc. Those are important, but there are other factors also which are very, very critical. And how easy is it? The single window concept is a very, very good concept. How easy is it for you to get the compliances in order? A lot of times, even if you're coming in from a clean industry, you've got no emissions, nothing of that sort. The pollution control board emissions, for example, and some of the other departments, it becomes very, very difficult to go through that whole process of getting those compliances in order. So the state support in getting the compliances in order, provided, of course, you are meeting all the norms. There's no shortcutting of anything at all. But the support that the state provides in order for you to complete all of those. So I'm very happy to see that a number of states are stepping up in terms of not just the demand creation also, which is a very important factor, but when you're coming in for manufacturing, you're looking at it from a long-term policy. You're looking at what is going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Only that will ensure a sustainability of them.
Absolutely. So you've got to get your ecosystem around you. And while, another important factor is while you support the large projects that are coming in, the mega projects, you should also support the MSMEs coming in, which are more than the supply chain, because those are not going to be the mega projects. But if you support those projects, those in turn support the mega projects, and that's how the whole ecosystem works. So it's a supply chain. You're going to look at it from a vertical standpoint.
Yeah, that's a very valuable input. That's a very valuable.
Yeah. So Maharashtra has good policies, and Maharashtra is very well located. Since Mr. Singh is here, I can tell you, from a logistical standpoint, it's right in the center. You've got the ports, which are very, very effective ports, and then distribution from there is easy. And of course, you've got a very large automotive manufacturing, which is already there in that state. So there are a number of such states which are very good with their policies. Some of them have a geographical advantage over the others, and that certainly helps.
In fact, that reminds me recently, I mean, soon after the EV policy was announced, I had an opportunity to interview the Honorable Industries Minister of Government of Maharashtra. And during a course of conversation, he was saying that there have been occasions earlier when some other state got inspired by the Maharashtra industry policy. And the Maharashtra EV policy may not be too different as well. So he was quite bullish, and going by the review and feedback that we are witnessing ever since the EV policy was launched, I think perhaps, and why not? If something is conducive for growth for health another state, worth getting inspired by. And but Mr. Singh, talking about the EV policy, from what I understand, based on feedback,
I think I can react to what Munjal said on 2-3 points.
Yes, please.
Like
Go ahead.
labor reforms in Maharashtra. Incidentally, I was labor secretary as well earlier, so I'm aware of that. And we have brought a lot of reforms, and almost all your approval licenses, either they are minimized or on self-declaration basis, or on a single window available, and the compliance within the stipulated time frame, which is 7 days in most of the cases, is more than 99%. So which means the policy of reforms has worked very well in state of Maharashtra. And wherever we found that a lot of legal framework, which was a dead wood, which was of no relevance, has been also scrapped and taken away. So, and right now we are working on those codes of labor which has been come from Government of India, and our the rules framework which is enabling those codes to be implemented is almost ready and in the final process. And you will very soon see that further labor reform which were required after the first set of reform which we did 2-3 years back will be coming very soon. That's one part. About the skilled manpower, as I already mentioned, Maharashtra is one of those states which has highly skilled manpower available. You won't find any breadth of that. The third, of course, is the logistics and the availability and connectivity to the major ports. I mentioned about the Dighi port, where we are coming up with a node of the industrial corridor, which is as big as 10,000 hectares of land. And you are not only Dighi port, you will be very close to the JNPT port as well. So that takes care of your international obligation and your international requirement. So all said and done, the logistics port, the kind of ecosystem which exists in Maharashtra with the major auto sector players over here. And MSME is one of our focus. In fact, Mr. Munjal mentioned about that. So MSME is one of our focus, and we are deliberating as to what further need to be done to incentivize and to promote the MSME sector and the whole supply chain so far the EV is concerned. And not only EV, the other focus areas which we have, like the medical devices and the bulk drugs, we are focusing on those areas as well. And we are creating the commensurate infrastructure and the kind of ambience and the environment you need to have to operate as an investor. So I think that should take care of your concerns when we are talking about various states, that Maharashtra is very proactive in that sense.
Yeah, indeed. And it's all the more reason for states like Maharashtra and whoever wishes to be a strong industry hub, especially for EVs, to be more and more proactive, because in these times, in these disruptive times, there's a growing competition among states also to attract investments. And some states with little or no.
We are very consciously aware of that.
Yes, and even like a state like Assam, which doesn't have an auto industry, also rolled out an EV policy. So it's interesting to see the developments. But Mr. Singh, I'm curious to understand, based on feedback, of course, this question is that why was there a delay in the start of the execution, or a lag between the announcement of the policy and its execution, especially the availability of the incentives and others?
As you mentioned yourself, there are a number of departments involved, which needed to bring and align their policies with the EV policy. That framework has been created now. So all the SOPs are ready. So there's a lag time only because of that. So you will see there will be a seamless process. That was the kind of thing we wanted to ensure before we actually start responding to the various kind of way. So that
which
has
is very
been already
critical. Yeah, right. You're right. I mean, better to have everyone aligned right at the beginning, and even if at the cost of a little bit of lag, so that it's sustainable and you meet all the
So
intended.
now when you come to Maharashtra, you will find the hitches or the bottlenecks are minimal, and which might not be foreseen, but which we are ready to address to as soon as we come to know that okay, these are the kind of bottlenecks that still exist.
Right.
So we are very proactive from that perspective. And
if I'm not wrong, the government has also set up a cell to monitor the feedback and if the policy needs any tweaking, right?
Absolutely. We have delegated power. We have got a committee constituted which will look into all these kind of issues and address those on a very short time framework basis.
Right. Mr. Mahesh Babu, I mean, Switch Mobility is a relatively new entity. It's yet to start its market operations in India, even though under the Ashok Leland banner, there was some activities, but now as a fresh new entity, I think you're just around the corner of starting the operations. So these are very almost I would say almost ideal times for kind of, if I were to call Switch Mobility a startup, especially given the focus on CVs, electric CVs.
I think Sumatra first is, as you said, Switch Mobility is nothing but the EV division of Leyland in India. But you also know that we had Optare electric buses, the double-decker London buses running from Optare, which is also a Switch Mobility now. So there is two parts to Switch Mobility's vision. One is to play a global role in electric mobility in commercial vehicle segment. So you know that we are already in London. We are setting up a European plant, and India plays a very vital role because India has a huge potential for manufacturing for the globe. So Switch Mobility India is going to not only play a vital role in EV transition for buses, commercial vehicles, and let's say LCVs in India, but we are going to play a substantial role in bringing the cost structure globally down by adding value to the global supply chain. So this is going to be an opportunity where we place India in the global map. We have been talking about thought leaders like my colleagues, which we are talking about how to place India in the global supply chain map. So I believe Switch is a forum by which India can play a vital role in supply chain by supplying aggregates, battery packs, and many more of auto components manufactured in India across the globe. I think that's what I look at, and I feel it's a huge opportunity. Having said that, the way in which the bus tenders are going, I'll be surprised that we may have to ramp up substantial production quantity because the EV tenders across the state have really motivated all of us, and we are going to play a very, very, what I would say, focus on delivering what is being committed to various states. And if all the bus makers in the country are able to do that, I think we have a good chance and a good roadmap for next 5 to 10 years.
That brings me to a question. Would you be tendering for any of the 1,900 buses in Mumbai?
Of course. How can I disappoint Mr. Singh and Maharashtra government? They are very progressive in both tendering and adapting to EV. And Switch Mobility of Ashok Leyland division will be very, very happy to contribute. And firstly, I will thank them to bring in such a clear and big tender. And now the question is, quickly we need to get the tender done and put the vehicles on the road. Finally, the proof of the pudding is when the rubber meets the road. So we will work closely with the government of Maharashtra and make sure their vision of electric mobility in public transport is addressed and served by Switch Mobility. So I would say that way. Switch is happy to serve the narrative of the Maharashtrian government to bring in electric mobility in buses and public transportation.
Okay, and that's good to know, and good to see the. I mean, this will also kind of spark of more increased efforts by manufacturers, especially commercial vehicle manufacturers, to kind of take a pie of this new set of kind of EV tenders for EVs that are being floated by various state governments. That's good to know, and we look forward to the first switch mobility switch commercial vehicles soon. So best wishes for that. And
so we'll transition, Sumantra, from Ashok Leyland brand to a Switch brand, but it's nothing but Switch is owned by Ashok Leyland.
Yes.
So that's how it is. So I see as the mother company and the parent company, and because we need focus on electric mobility, we are bringing
everything is being clumped together
in the global scenario to bring them together in Switch brand, and we want to serve the customers better. That's how I look at it.
I think with such a focused kind of approach, the results would definitely be better than what compared to the earlier model, of course. In between, I'll also dip into the chat box to see for any questions that our attendees would be asking. So there, let me take in the first question. This is a question addressed to Mr. Munjal. What is your read of the PLI scheme announced for the auto industry? How does company like yours, focused purely on BEV, can benefit out of it? Are eligibility criterion loaded against older startup like yours?
Very valid question. We are still waiting for some answers from the government on this, on what are the fine print of the PLI scheme. The earlier scheme which was there, that was loaded against the existing players, and it was catering only to the newer players. And we had approached the government to say that, why are you disincentivizing the older players who've been in the market for a long time and would be investing into this category as well. So it should be a level playing field from an investment standpoint. Now, as I understand it, we will be getting the information in the next couple of days, the fine print, and we should have more clarity at that point of time. So I won't really make a comment on this right now, till such time as we've gone through all of that.
Okay, good. Let me come to you, Mr. Aneja. When it comes to you deal with all current, existing, and prospective investors, and you get a lot of insights and the kind of requirements that they have. What are the top 3 requirements that they look for before making the final decision of signing on the check for investment, especially when it comes to all these states coming up with EV policies? So what are the key factors that they weigh before taking the final decision?
Sure, Sumantra. So of course, with more than 16 states already having their EV policies announced, more than 8 states in the pipeline, investors do have a whole lot of options where to go. And a couple of these states, mostly the southern states and the state of Maharashtra, of course, do have good supply side incentives for manufacturers, do have a good ecosystem for these manufacturers to come and take advantage of these state policies. So specifically from a battery standpoint, the kind of queries which we have received from most of the investors are firstly around green power availability. So anybody who's making batteries or any component which will go into a clean tech sort of an application, e-mobility or renewable power or the grid, so they want to be as green as possible. So the circular economy is what we call. So what kind of efforts is the state taking to provide green power to the investors? Can they facilitate private partnerships with existing renewable energy companies, or can they facilitate some sort of captive plant for renewable energy for the captive usage of these battery companies or other EV component manufacturing companies? This is one. Secondly, of course, these investors are looking for the complete supply chain ecosystem, what the state offers. This is, of course, a no-brainer. And then thirdly, chemical processing capability. This again is very important because if I talk about batteries in particular, most of these companies, specifically from a supply chain perspective, raw material, of course, would be imported. But raw material lithium is not more than 5-7% by value. If a pack is 100 rupees, $100 per kilowatt hours, lithium by that lithium in that context will not be more than $5 to $7. So a major part of the real value addition goes into chemical process of converting these raw materials to usable electrodes. So specifically for cathode manufacturers, they are concerned with what's the existing chemical processing capability of the state. Chemical companies operating in the state might not have made battery grade materials because those need to be excessively pure, 99.5% pure. But having said this, what sort of capabilities do they have, and do they so this is chemical capabilities, and chemical processing capabilities is definitely the second most important point. And of course, availability of ports. That's again, some imports have to happen, and given that the Indian market is in a nascent stage, everybody is looking at the export opportunity also. So availability of port also definitely helps. So these are the kind of FAQs I would say which definitely we are getting from an investor perspective to invest into before investing into these states.
Okay. That's good to know. And Mr. Singh, I mean, since you also mentioned that you always look for inputs and ideas. I'm sure it was already a part of it. There's a lot of engineering institutes within the state of Maharashtra, and a good number of graduates come out every year, and many of them are of very high standards when it comes to skilling. And therefore, with the are you putting an added focus on skilling or technical education, more focus for more oriented towards electric EV technology?
That we are in touch with the skill development department, and very soon probably they will bring out those particular type of courses which are required for the electric vehicle. But in addition to that, we have a lot of technical skill development agencies in the state, which we will be also coordinating with to start the courses on the requirements of the industry.
Okay. Now, let me get an industry perspective. Mr. Mahesh Babu, I mean, in the West, it's historically there has been a strong industry academia collaboration much before the electrification megatrend started. In India, yes, there has been, but few and far in between. And especially now, when it comes to these concerted efforts, both at the central government level and state government level also, what would you suggest that can be done or should be done when devising such initiatives, both by the central government and the various state governments as well?
Mantra, it's a very valid question. I think we need to learn from what's happening in the US. If you look at India, academic, industry, and government relation is not very well, I would say, articulated well. Because there is a central government, there is a state government, and there are so many other things which is there. I think what is needed is the academics cannot learn without an industry on a practical purpose on skilling. You may teach them academics, but there is a lot of reports saying Indian engineers coming out, their skill levels are not as equal as anything we are seeing from other countries or developed countries. I think it is important to bring the employability of the engineers coming out through skilling by engaging them into industrial projects. And this can come only by grants, because what happens is, if you look at US structure of grants, there is a very clear level 1, level 2 up to level 8 or whatever it is there, whether it is a research project or whether it is an application of the research project or it is an industrialization project. There are very clear definitions on participation, and people who take such are very clear at what level they are doing that. Because most of the time that academics and industry confuses on research projects. Let's say industrialization of lithium ion cell is right now going on, but there is a lot of research going on in aluminum air batteries, fuel cells, and things like that. So these two needs two different support from government grants, because some needs focused work and what I would say piloting, where industry will play a less role, academics will play a higher role. Whereas in the other end, like PLI for the advanced chemistry batteries, industry will play a higher role, academics will participate and learn through it. So this mechanism has to be done. I'm sure somebody in the central and state government, maybe Maharashtra is very industrious. They can look at it to institutionalize this as a method of grants given by the state or central governments to academics who is insisted, or I would say forced towards working on industrial live projects. Even if we go for any, let's say, executive program abroad, whether it is for Harvard or Yale or anywhere, we don't sit in the classroom. We go to a live industry projects to solve some live problems of the industry. But I have never seen that in India, because we give marks after marks. I think we need to come out of the marks and give more of an experience to people, because when people come out, they know the basics, but they know how to navigate and walk around in the industry to create value for the state and the country. I think that is very important, and that can be done only like what's happening in auto industry to EV. Similar thing has to happen in some of the institutes like IIT, IIM have moved to that level, but we'll have to look at every institute getting it to that level and then making more a skill and experience based industrial work. And industry has to participate. We have to welcome such people coming to the industry, spending time learning, and we are open to them.
Indeed, right said. And the framework has to be done. The industry also has to participate, and of course, all in all, it will also those regions, those industries, those states which are more active on this will automatically be more attractive as investment destinations in the upcoming EV industry. So another question is someone who has made a comment and also wants to understand why the industry is so betting for more subsidies, because EV manufacturing started about, the anonymous attendees asked, EV manufacturing started about 15 years back with the carbon credit promotion. Government subsidy was another kind of promo tool, he says, or he or she says, with FAME 1, 2, etc. Why wasn't investment done in electric and electronic manufacturing during the last 15 years? Why are we betting for more subsidy now? So, as someone who has been who has remained invested for long, sustained investment, Mr. Munjal, your thoughts?
Should I also answer? Should I be answering that as anonymous or in my own form? Okay, so to whoever asked this question, so basically, when you look at it, the batteries are expensive. So effectively, you're buying fuel on day one. You're buying it's not a product which you're paying on a daily basis. So let's look at a TCO and let's look at the concept of a running cost, the initial purchase price. What happens with subsidies is there's either two ways you can approach this. You can take it, you can approach it from a stick approach, in which case what they've done in China, where they banned the sale of IC engine vehicle in a number of cities and states. What they said is that, if you want to buy an IC engine vehicle, you have to buy a license for it, or you have to buy a permit for it, and you have to bid for the permit. And the cost of that permit could be as high as the cost of the vehicle, or even higher, depending on how desperately you want and for which category you want the permit. Now in India, clearly, at this point of time, you're not mandating vehicles to that extent at all. So how do you convert from a polluting vehicle to a non-polluting vehicle, to a clean vehicle, which is what the need of the hour is? So batteries are expensive. The cost has come down dramatically over the last 10 years, 85% in the last 10 years. Nevertheless, batteries are still expensive. What happens with these policies? Now, if you look at the NMMP policy, what Sumatra was talking about at the beginning, that was announced in 2012. And only looking at oil saving, the investment of 14,000 crores, which was earmarked or which was planned at that point of time, was going to yield 40,000 crores for the government on the oil saving alone. Forget the pollution, forget the environmental benefits or the health and other factors. That is the calculation at that point of time which was done. Now, when you look at it, you've got pollution, which is a big factor. I don't know what part of the country you wrote this message from, but if you're in the north, you know how badly smogged in we get when it comes winters. You look at it from a health safety standpoint. So there is saving that the government actually does by promoting and by pushing electric mobility. So initial purchase price comes down. Now, the benefit that electric has is in terms of the TCO. But like we've been saying, you need to set it milestone based. You hit a certain milestone, the subsidies come down. You hit another milestone, the subsidies come down. This is not something which should be continued in perpetuity. So either you use a stick approach to say that completely banned, or you support it to get it up to a certain level and get it up, and then there would be a tapering off that could happen.
Yeah.
Now, besides financial support, there are also other factors to be done. For example, awareness. Awareness for electromobility is still poor when it comes to across the country. When you go to tier 3, tier 4 towns, when you go to rural, even in the larger towns, awareness is still poor. Financing of these vehicles. So there are a number of factors which need to fall in place by which we would have switched to electric. If you look at, if you consider for that matter, the Beijing Olympics, the Olympics almost had to be cancelled because of the pollution levels. But when you look at the pollution levels in Beijing, there are a number of factors which have been done. It's not just automotive, but a number of factors. When you look at those cities, the pollution levels have come down dramatically on the number of steps that have been taken.
Because of the new energy policy which they had.
Correct. So in India, there are again a number of steps that we need to take. And in urban India, automotive pollution is a very, very important factor when it comes to health issues. Pollution, PM 2.5 coupled with COVID is a deadly combination, not a great combination to have. So you need support to start off. Over a period of time, then those could be tapered down or tapered off as we go.
That's very well put. And with that, we have come to the fag end of this session. But before we end, I would like to request last words from each one of you. Staying with you, Mr. Munjal, your last words before we end the session.
So my last words would be that the switch to electric is inevitable. It is something which is much required in India. Whether we look at it from a safety or from a health standpoint, we look at it from an oil importation standpoint or any other standpoint. Of course, the ecosystem's got to fall in place, but that will happen. Once we get to a certain level in terms of the numbers, everything else will begin to fall in place. So let's put the horse before the cart. Let the horse pull the cart and the cart will come. But what we're going to see from here on, with the policies that are already in place and are falling in place, we are going to see what they call as the hockey stick growth. We are going to see a substantial change, and that is going to be actually very, very good for India. So I am extremely, extremely bullish about this industry. I have always been in this market for 14 years. And now, I mean, I can say it with confidence. It's not a matter of when and what and it's already happening in front of us. The change is happening.
And no wonder that you are cited as an example of being a determined investor on a particular cause. So best wishes for the journey ahead as well. And
thank you so much.
Again, in line with the theme of this session, industry, government industry collaboration, Mr. Singh, your last words.
You are welcome to Maharashtra. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
I would say that all of you are welcome to Maharashtra. We have put the policy in place, the ecosystem is in place, logistics port is in place. You have the highly skilled manpower available in Maharashtra. We have a very good land policy. In addition to the 3 corridors I mentioned, the MIDC of Maharashtra has developed industrial area over the entire Maharashtra. We have more than 287 industrial corridors, which are the state corridors, which are existing. So anywhere you are willing to come and invest, we are with you, and we will be very proactive to support whoever is the potential investor who want to come. And I will request Mr. Devashish Aneja from Invest India to coordinate with us with all the potential investors. So we will be more than welcome. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Singh. That's a state government's perspective. Now let's get the central government's perspective, if you like, from Invest India.
So Mantra, so before that, just one quick comment, Mr. Singh, we are actually already engaging with the state of Maharashtra. In fact, last week itself, we were doing a roadshow in Japan for PLI ACC scheme, in which we had representation from the joint CEO of MIDC. So we are definitely engaging with your team, and we'll be happy to do that in the coming days as well. We'll continue with that. And Mantra, from a closing remarks perspective, definitely, I mean, it's a no-brainer that we are definitely going to see a massive growth in the coming years. The kind of enabling policy framework we have had in the previous few years, we are already seeing a good amount of traction in this, specifically in this year 2021. We have from a policy perspective, we have the PLIs, we have the same revised. From an investments perspective, we are seeing good amount of investments pipeline flowing into India. from a demand perspective, within this calendar year, we have seen the number of sales within the first 7 months was already more than the sales of EVs in the last complete calendar year. And from a product launch or expansion perspective, we have players like, we have Mr. Manjal from Hero Electric, who's having big expansion plans. We have players like a Tata Motors, Switch Mobility, Ola Electric. All of these are having big expansion plans, which we are supporting to a certain extent. And my humble request would be, in case Hero Electric or Switch Mobility or any of the companies on this webinar, in case you need any support on the investment facilitation front, either from a state or a central perspective, do keep us posted. We'll be happy to support you.
Great.
Thank you.
Good to see such messages being shared on this forum. And your closing remarks, Mr. Mahesh Babu.
Thanks, Sumatra. When I moved into the industry, EV industry 6 years back, EV is seen as a disbelief. So today what I'm seeing is we moved from disbelief to belief. And industry was looking at more of a performance. I think industry has moved from performance to passion. And government was looking at taxing, from taxing to take off. So I think we are at a very cusp of industry, consumer belief, industry investment, and government support. I think this is the most conducive period to get the best out of the customer, because the EV is fundamentally the best way to move, clean a person from one place to another or goods to one place to another. That fundamentally is so strong. That's why the government is supporting, industry is investing, and consumer are slowly adapting from disbelief to belief. I think we are right there, and we need to make it well to execution, because in India, we all know that our plans are very nice. When it comes to execution, we fumble. I strongly believe in EV case, we will not fumble as industry. I'm sure government is not going to fumble as in policy, the intent which they are showing, and consumers are not going to let us down. So we are going to make a success story from India to the globe. That's what I see.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And if the efforts by, let's say, a state like Maharashtra is any indication of setting up a dedicated cell to ensure that the execution is as per plan, I'm sure those mismatch or the fumbles will not happen anymore. And on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a really, really insightful and very fruitful discussion, I think, and I'm sure you would all agree. And with that, it is also the end of what is my last panel discussion at AutoCAD Professional. So on that note, I wish you all the best on behalf of AutoCAD Professional. Best wishes to you and your teams. Please take care and stay safe. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mantru. Thank you.
All the best, Sumant.
Very well moderated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all the attendees, thank you very much for logging into the first day of the 3-day EV forum. Before I close, I would like to quickly thank our sponsor partners, Lanxess, Varroc Engineering, Eaton Corporation, and associate partners, Borg Warner, Cibros, Orbitz, and Padmini VNA. And the last day also happens to be a kind of innovation day at the Lanxess. It's called the Lanxess Innovation Day. Please do tune in for that. And tomorrow we have got 2 very interesting panel discussions. One on technology trends and indigenizing the EV ecosystem, and the another one is on market adoption and the road ahead in terms of new trends, new avenues. So do tune in again. And with that, thank you very much and wish you a good day ahead.